What's good, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy Zeta here, aka the guy your girl tells you not to worry about. Back at it again to drop What If Deku and Bakugo Fused. It has been literally 2 weeks since I've posted the last part, so I don't blame a lot of you guys for not keeping up with what's been going on with the series. Up on screen, if you guys have been caught up with the previous parts, should be a timestamp in case you guys want to skip over to that part and you don't want to hear the intro. But for those of you who just barely clicked on the video, what's up? My name's Zether. I drop What If anime content for you guys to watch and enjoy every day. So if you end up liking this video, consider definitely leaving a like on the video. But with that said, I think we should keep the intro short and sweet because you guys are in for a treat with this video. It has probably been one of my best ideas that I've ever had. Credit to Weeb. And yeah, with that said, I hope you guys do wholeheartedly go on to enjoy today's video. That being said, let's get started.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Okay, so we start off our story in the perspective of a young Izuku. Now Izuku would be walking behind 3 of his friends, childhood friends at that, as Bakugo would be yelling, "March! March! March!" You know, all of them are basically walking behind Bakugo. Bakugo's over there telling everybody to, follow him and that he's gonna take them to victory. They would have been playing some weird childhood game at this point, and Bakugo would have simply been walking around shooting explosions from his hand saying, "Isn't my quirk so great?" At this point, Deku would say, "Wow, Kachan, I wish someday I can have a quirk just like yours." As Bakugo would say, "Izuku, you'll never have a quirk like mine, you Deku." As Deku would be like, okay. He would basically proceed to keep walking, and it's at this point that Bakugo would walk over a bridge. Now, it's at this point that Bakugo would end up overlooking the bridge and would literally fall off into the water. Immediately, Deku would rush over to Bakugo's direction, being like, "Are you okay, Kachan?" And at this point, he would touch Bakugo's hand. Bakugo would have been staring at Deku at this moment, being like, "How dare this quirkless loser," before he can even register what just happened. And I'm guessing many of you guys know what moment this is. It's when Deku helps Bakugo out of the water, yada yada yada. So as this is happening, Deku would grab Bakugo's hand, and as soon as they touch, a huge glow would literally just start emanating from the body of Deku and Bakugo, as both of their bodies would quite literally float into the air. As both of their bodies are glowing a weird aura, they would then collide into each other as they would fuse and fall back onto the ground. It's at this point that the other 2 boys would be like, "What?" As it would literally be revealed that Bakugo and Deku are both gone, and in their place, some kid is just sitting there. Now immediately both of them would be like, "What did you do with Bakugo?" They wouldn't even be paying any mind to Izuku, as Bakugo and Izuku would both stand up and like, what? They would look at those 2 kids as they're like, "Who are you guys again?" As the kids would be like, "Huh?" And at this point, Bakugo and Deku would both kind of like look at each other at their hands as they're like, "What's going on?" Now, at this point, I'm pretty sure many of you guys are like, "Yo, they fuse with how do they fuse?" Well, let me explain. At the beginning of the video, I was honestly going to be using Potara fusion as the means of their fusion and all this crazy stuff. But instead, I decided to pretty much give Deku a quirk. Now, this quirk is going to be a fusion one, and the doctors won't be able to identify it. So they're going to be thinking that it was some random cause that ended up causing this to happen. Now, at this point, they're like, "What do we even call you?" And it would literally look at their direction as he's like, "Call me Dekugo?" As they're like, "Yeah, Dekugo, that's the name." As they proceed to just simply stand up, and at this point they're looking at their hands just wondering what's going on. Now, it's not like some crazy dire situation where this fusion took place in the middle of some heated battle against Majin Buu or something like that, and they understood what they were doing. This happened out of nowhere. Both of their consciousness fused, and Deku and Bakugo are no more. It's a whole different person. Now at this point, Dekugo or whatever, which is I'm going to be referring to during the beginning, because trust me, that's a horrible name. This is just the name that they gave themselves. We're going to be renaming them later on, all right? So let's just say that Dekugo basically ends up doing, all this crazy stuff. And after this, they basically end up running over to Mitsuki's house, aka Bakugo's mom. They would go there, and as soon as she sees this, she would scream. She'd be like, ah, you know what I mean? Like, she yells out, and the husband comes running in, Bakugo's dad, as he's like, we gotta take you to the Quirk doctor. Immediately, they would be told the story by the other two kids, and they would call Inko and Hisashi over to the hospital. Where at this point, everything would be in confusion and chaos. Now, when they do end up making it to the hospital, one of the doctors would end up explaining that they have no idea what happened, but one thing is for sure, they fused. And it seems as if Deku and Bakugo's consciousness fused to create a brand new one. This isn't Deku or Bakugo anymore. This is a completely different person. As it's at this point that we would proceed to have like so many different things happen. You know what I mean? Like, all of them are just like, what? Like what do we do? You know what I mean? And it's at this point that the doctors would literally look at them and say, well, I don't know what to do. You guys will most likely have to sign some paperwork to see who takes custody of the child from now on. And it's at this point that Inko would say, oh, Izuku, come home with me. Let's go. As Mitsuki is like, yo, you got me all the way messed up. Bakugo is coming home with me. And at this point, they would both look at the child as they're like, as the kid is just looking at both of the moms bickering. They're like, stop. And the kid is like, I don't even know my name yet. As Inko and Mitsuki would both be like, what should we name him? As it's at this point that both of them would end up saying, all right, look, how about we combine both of their last names? And they're like, okay, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. So the name that they end up giving Deku and Bakugo is Katsuya. That is the name that Bakugo and Deku fusion is going to be happening. But I'm not going to be referring to them as Katsuya during this entire series. I'm literally going to be saying Deku the whole entire time, because it's what if Deku and Bakugo fused, and I don't want to have to say Katsuya every single time or Bakugo every single time. So I'm going to say Deku for the purpose of the story. However, guys, just do remember that it's going to be referring to Bakugo and Deku as a fusion. Now, after this, they would have a Quirk test done on them, and Deku would proceed to shoot an explosion from his hand. Now, when he shoots the explosion, it would be very, very powerful, like hugely powerful, because the fusion actually ended up giving them a 10 times boost to their power that they already had. So the Quirk became amplified tenfold, and now the Quirk was way too hard and powerful to control for Deku. So at this point, Deku and Bakugo ended up being told that they're going to be needing to work on this Quirk of theirs in order for it not to destroy them. And this would cause this whole entire new personality of like Bakugo's like anger and cockiness, and Deku's fear and like overthinkingness or no analytical mindset to kind of like fuse into one, as it would like nod and understand what he needs to do. At this point, Deku would proceed to essentially look at Mitsuki and Inko, as they would both pretty much just decide that they're going to be splitting custody of Izuku and Deku mixed into one person, meaning Katsuya. And so with that being said, they basically end up taking Deku for the half of the week, and then Bakugo for the other half of the week. Now, I know I ended up saying that I was going to be referring to Katsuya as Deku or for the whole series, but even I can't keep it up. It just feels weird having to refer to Deku and Bakugo every single time. So I'm actually going to be using the name Katsuya. Now, at this point, Katsuya would basically end up becoming a perfect hero in a sense. Because I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this, but Deku always had the heart of hero. He always had the pure mindset of becoming a hero. And Bakugo always had, well, the strength of a hero. Even when we can see Bakugo doing things like in the provisional license exam, when he ended up saving people, he did save them, but he was really aggressive, and it kind of seemed like he was filling more of an endeavor role where he saved people, but he didn't kind of like calm their minds or make them feel better. But Deku, when he saves people with a smile. He's happy, he's kind of like letting people know they're safe. So mixing all that together, we get a hero along the lines of All Might, somebody who's going to become a perfect hero one day. And with that said, with both of their natures mixing into one another, this creates a super overpowered, super like really OP and also cool overpowered hero. Now, when they do end up basically going back into their kid forms, I guess you could say, when no, not kid forms, but school, what ends up happening is when they walk into the classroom, all of the kids look at them and they're like, so what do we call you? Immediately Katsuya would look at the classes, he's like, just call me Katsuya, as they'd be like, okay. Now at this point, he would grow up among all of his classmates, and the first couple of like weeks were so strange because they were like, Deku and Katsuya would look at them and be like, no, call me Katsuya. At this point, they'd be like, okay, Katsuya, as they proceed to just look at Katsuya as he grows up and he proceeds to train his quirk over the weekends every single day. Not every single day, but every single weekend they would train on their quirk, controlling it and making it so that they have full control over that quirk that they were given to them. And when they grow up, they end up having a pretty cool childhood because they're a really nice person who also has a lot of confidence. So growing up, if you guys can put this all together, he would grow up in a quirk society where he has a very powerful quirk and a very heroic heart and mindset. So Katsuya would always stay at the top of his class when it comes to grades. He would always be very popular and liked by many of the students. And when it comes to how Deku fares outside of school, Deku would have a pretty cool relationship with his parents because after like a couple of months or so, they ended up getting used to this whole routine of switching back and forth. And now Deku literally has two families, or Katsuya literally has two families, right? So Katsuya is pretty happy. He's having a pretty good life as it stands. And so with that, we're going to be skipping over to middle school, where during middle school, he ended up enrolling in a bunch of sport teams and ended up becoming the captain of the soccer and basketball team, where he ended up leading their teams to the finals, state finals. And Deku is basically just this really liked person overall, aka Katsuya. Sorry if I mess up and say Deku, Bakugo, Katsuya. You guys should know what I mean, right? They fuse, right? So yeah. Anyways, with that said, they basically all end up kind of like growing up together. Deku and all of his friends that he would have had normally would have ended up basically like just fusing into one big pile of bunch. Like Bakugo's goons ended up becoming pretty good friends with Katsuya as the years went on, and seeing as Bakugo wasn't influencing his friends to become these bad apples, I guess you could say, they ended up growing up to become like pretty heroic. They ended up going to their own wanting to go to their own different hero high schools together, and Bakugo was going to be enrolling into UA, aka Katsuya, you guessed it. So with that all said, we can finally now skip over to the day of the middle school sludge incident. And with that, we have the teacher walking into the classroom saying, now guys, settle down, settle down, settle down. He would look towards the back of the class as he would see Katsuya laying down, kind of just like with his head leaned back and laying back in the desk, you know, something that Bakugo would do. As he would look at the direction, smile, and like kind of like wave his hand at Katsuya as he would nod, acknowledging the teacher, and the teacher would then proceed to say, well, normally guys, I would make you guys do a bunch of career aptitude tests, to which the students all go, until he finally looks at them and says, but I know you all want to become heroes, as he would throw the papers into the air, and the class would start erupting with their quirks. They would all start showing everything off as all of them looked towards Katsuya's direction. Katsuya would smile and have a smirk on his face as he's like, all of us are going to become heroes someday. As all the class would go haywire and the teacher would say, yeah, all of you guys have very impressive quirks. He would read off to the class that Katsuya actually wants to go to the national school, aka UA. And at this point, the class would be like, Katsuya's definitely gonna make it. He's gonna become the #1 hero someday. As some people in the class would start muttering how it's crazy how Deku and Bakugo fused one day, and now they're this incredible person. As people just start like nodding their heads, they're like, and Deku and Bakugo internally, well, since their consciousness is technically gone, wouldn't technically be able to react to this, but Katsuya would look at them kind of like with a weird stare and be like, yeah. As class is dismissed, he would grab all of his book bags and his friends would invite him to go to the arcade after school. Katsuya would be like, nah man, I actually got too much homework to do. I'll see you guys tomorrow though. as they proceed to look at him and be like, whatever. They would walk away as they're like, have a good day, man. Deku would fist bump both of his friends as he would say, yeah, you guys too. He would look at the time, noticing that it's actually a little later than he would like, as he would proceed to simply look at the watch and be like, oh yeah, I gotta get home. My mom's birthday today. She's gonna kill me. He would proceed to basically begin to rush straight in through this tunnel, as out of nowhere, from the sewage, this random green sludge would appear from nowhere. And it would jump out into the air as it would say, give me your body, kid. I didn't know that freak was in town. At this point, Katsuya would jump up into the air as he would shoot explosions at the ground, and the sludge monster would look as Katsuya is literally flying off the ground, shooting explosions to keep himself there. The sludge villain would look at him as it would try to stretch its arm out and like pretty much just swap him out of the air to take his body. But at this point, Bakugo or Katsuya would remain into the air, as the sludge villain would be like, you damn bastard. He would say, give me your body now, kid. I need it. That freak is here. I didn't know All Might was here. Katsuya hearing this, sharing both of the love that Deku and Bakugo has together for All Might, would say, All Might? As he would jump down to the ground and say, and look behind the sludge villain. As the sludge villain would like literally shiver in fear, as you can just hear All Might going, Texas smash! He would throw a gigantic blow at the sludge villain's direction, which would cause the sludge villain to splatter all over the walls. And after this, we would basically have Katsuya looking at All Might in all of his glory, as he quite literally proceeds to immediately grab his backpack, take out a book, and be like, All Might, I am your biggest fan. It would mean the world to me if you were to sign my book. Can I please have your autograph? All Might would look at Katsuya's direction as he's like, weren't you just flying, kid? Katsuya would look at All Might and say, oh yeah, it's my quirk. Sorry, but this villain tried to catch me and I figured I would just keep my distance until a pro arrived. All Might would say, you did the right thing, kid. You stalled him just enough. He would say, of course you can have my autograph. As he would say, so kid, how does your quirk work? Immediately Katsuya would be like, well, it basically works in the sense that I have explosions. I produce nitroglycerin from my body that can explode. All Might hearing this would be like, that's amazing, kid. He would look at the sludge villain as he would say, mind helping me out? And Deku would look at Bakugo's direction, or no, not Bakugo, but Katsuya would look at All Might's direction as he would say, sure thing, All Might. He would proceed to start helping All Might bottle up the sludge villain, as All Might would have a big bright smile on his face, and at this point All Might would realize one thing. He made a mistake. His big All Might form would quite literally go up into smoke as he would cough out blood, and Katsuya would see as All Might would shrink to a shell of what he normally looks like. After seeing this, he'd be like, what? Who are you? As All Might would be like, don't worry, kid. It's still me. He would look at Katsuya's direction as he would say, it's still me, kid. And Katsuya would be like, what's going on? As All Might would explain that long ago, he ended up receiving an injury that caused him to only be able to remain in his big form for a couple of hours. Explained that it's kind of like how guys in the pool flex and tuck in their stomachs to appear bigger. He would say, I'm just like that. As Deku would be like, what? And at this point, Katsuya would just be shocked. Also, guys, if there is a little bit of background noise, apologies for that. But with that being said, what basically ends up happening is Katsuya would look at All Might as he would say, is there any way I can help you? As All Might would just look at Katsuya and be like, there might just be. At this point, Deku would look at All Might's direction with a weird like stare. He would just be like, huh? As All Might would say, meet me at this location tomorrow, kid. I want to talk to you, maybe train you up a little bit. Now, after Katsuya hears this, he's like, oh, of course. He writes down the address immediately and says, see you there, All Might. As All Might would basically grab the sludge villain and walk off towards the police department. At this point, Katsuya would jump up into the air being like, woohoo!
Now, let's begin where we left off. Katsuya, the fusion between Deku and Bakugo, was, well, just in the sludge villain incident, and they were, well, sort of saved by All Might. They fanboyed a little bit, obviously, over All Might himself, and then eventually leading to him giving Katsuya the location to a place that All Might wanted Katsuya to meet him at. So, that's exactly what happens. Katsuya goes home that same night, and then eventually the next day meets All Might at, well, Dagobah Beach. All Might is there waiting, and Katsuya runs up like a excited fanboy. Well, All Might then begins to explain. Let me explain to you, young Katsuya, why you are here with me. I, well, as you know, am seriously injured. All Might then shows, well, his injury to his lungs and other internal organs, and Katsuya slightly winces at it once again, and All Might continues to explain. He explains that he needs, personally, a successor to his Quirk, one for all. So that's exactly what he wants Katsuya to be. But he also explains that, well, they need to get him into shape. Katsuya is kind of confused by this, asking that isn't he already in shape? And of course All Might agrees that Katsuya is definitely in shape, but a couple more months wouldn't hurt by any means. They then agree to the extra training, and that's what All Might gives him. All Might gives Katsuya the training of their life. They begin pulling trash, piles of trash off Dagobah Beach, from, well, refrigerators, stoves, to various other things like ovens and other regular trash. Eventually, after 2 months pass, well, they're done. They were actually in pretty good shape, maybe better shape than All Might even gave them credit for, and they were able to finish it, well, in no time, eventually leading to All Might giving them his Quirk. Katsuya waits in basically excitement as All Might pulls a strand of his hair out and gives it to him. What is this for? It's for you to eat. Eat this. A piece of your hair. You want me to eat a piece of your hair? All Might then explains that, well, the only way to transfer his Quirk is through DNA. So it's this or blood. Yes. Is that a problem? Oh god, this is actually disgusting. So Katsuya bites the bullet and eats All Might's hair, leading to them being the new successor of One for All. A couple hours pass, and finally One for All is, well, active. Katsuya begins trying to activate One for All, but can't really seem to get a hold of it at first, eventually leading to, well, a massive explosion. Katsuya gets the idea that maybe if he just uses his regular Quirk, it will appear. And well, in hindsight, this wasn't the best idea, especially being in an open area like this. He blasts basically the ground and it explodes in something massive. Well, it's like they're at square one once again. When Deku and Bakugo fused for the first time, well, and only time, they had to control their Quirk with all their might. They had to train extremely hard to make sure that their explosions wouldn't blow up a building. And now One for All is multiplying that like crazy once again. But All Might explains that, well, that's because they're using 100%. He points at his hand and they look and it's completely broken. What the? How did it break? Why am I just feeling this now? They begin freaking out and All Might says that it's just fine and that they'll get it healed by someone that he knows and they'll continue the training. But they're gonna have to find a way to use One for All without breaking their limbs. And this is actually when Katsuya meets Recovery Girl for the first time. He gets healed, and obviously after a couple more days of just natural healing, he'll be just fine. But All Might obviously gets a lecture from her as she hits him on the head, saying to not push the kid so hard, and that All Might is gonna be a bad teacher if he continues this. All Might apologizes and promises that he will not push him too hard, knowing this to be kind of a lie. So the training then starts up once again, and this goes on for about 8 months. With Izuku's basically analytical mind and Bakugo's battle strategy, it's pretty easy for them to, well, figure out full cowling, and eventually leading them to be able to use about 35% full cowling. And this may seem like a lot, but you gotta think about it. Izuku and Bakugo are fused, already making a being that is stronger than a normal human. On top of that, they've been training every weekend, and over the last course of, we're talking maybe 10 years. So if we're talking about a human that would be able to control something of maybe 35%, that's not too outlandish for someone like Katsuya, especially after training for 2 more months intensively with All Might. During all this intensive training, Katsuya thought it would be a great idea to more or less record this training and put it on social media, as in Instagram, Twitter, things like that. And during this training, they got really popular. They started getting views, tons of views, and a lot of followers, becoming actually kind of famous. But luckily, this most likely won't affect them very much, at least in the thing that's about to come up. Because, well, in terms of the UA entrance exam, everyone's going to be stressed out about that instead of stressing about a famous social media star that may be, well, trying out for UA right next to them. So, then that's where we lead to the UA entrance exam. After the whole 10 months of training and also studying, which you probably don't want to hear about that. I don't think you want me to go through a book of studying. They then go to, well, the UA entrance exam. They arrive and they see tons of people there, tons of future possible heroes. They enter in and, well, President Mike begins talking, begins telling them everything, and eventually tells them about the written exam, leading to, well, obviously them doing it. And frankly, it'd be pretty easy for them. We're talking about 2 people that were already really smart combining into one person, and, well, fusion normally leads to some, well, core intelligence being increased. So it's not too outlandish to think that Katsuya would pass this with flying colors, obviously leading to, well, the practical exam. The practical exam is where everything gets interesting. Robots will be counted as points. You have 1 point, 2 point, 3 points, and 4 point robots. And that is exciting for Katsuya, ready to dash out of the gate as soon as possible. Once the gate swings open, that's exactly what happens. Katsuya blasts forward with only 10% of One For All, feeling that he probably won't need all 35%, at least right now. So they continue just bashing and thrashing every single robot in their sight, racking up tons of points. If Bakugo thought this exam was easy to destroy the robots, getting over 100 points in robot points, I'm sure this would be super easy for Katsuya with One For All and an explosion quirk that is amplified by 10 initially and then amplified again by One For All. Something tells me that this character is beyond broken. So Katsuya destroys tons of robots, probably getting, we're talking up to 150 to 170 robot points alone. Until, well, a bunch of rumbling and shaking begins to be heard, followed by the screams of various other possible UA students. Katsuya looks to see a giant robot. Katsuya kind of smirks at this, but thinks that maybe it's for the best to take their leave, since, well, everyone else is doing the same. He is about to leave until, well, he hears a scream. The inner hero then turns immediately and puts pedal to the metal, blasting his way all the way to the girl and throwing the rubble off of her. He grabs her, but sees that the robot is already on hot pursuit. He blasts away, putting the girl down, and realizes that he might need to use 100% of One For All for this, and that this is gonna hurt. He blasts up with 35% and blasts the robot, but not a dent. It's not enough, So he decides to pull out 100%, knowing that this will most likely break his arm, but he should be able to catch himself with his other. He blasts the robot with a massive explosion, one that encompasses the entire robot entirely. The robot cannot even be seen, and it was as if it was disintegrated from existence. The explosion towered even buildings. Katsuya began to fall, and he tries to catch himself, shooting his, non-broken arm using explosions with no one for all at all. But the thing is, when he does so, he begins spinning. Oh, this is not good at all. He begins falling and tries to catch himself once again, trying to change his trajectory, but luckily he's saved. He's slapped in the face by someone and begins floating and stops before he hits the ground. Now that's new. He looks to the side and sees the same girl that he just saved, and she smiles, saying that it looks like they're, both even now. Katsuya then lands on the ground after Ochako Uraraka lets him. He then introduces himself kinda oddly and just tells her to call him Katsuya, and she introduces, herself as well. Recovery Girl comes over and slightly slaps Katsuya on the head and kisses him on the forehead as well, leading to his arm healing completely. So Izuku thanks her and takes his leave, eventually arriving at one of his homes, the Bakugo household, and they celebrate all the good stuff that he did in the entrance exam. And they also invited over Inko and Hisashi to celebrate too. I mean, this is sort of their boy as well, half and half. So they should be able to celebrate what they think is a job well done, Katsuya. So that's what happens. They celebrate, have a good time, nothing too crazy, but they have a good time nonetheless. The next day though, training starts up once again. Katsuya continues the training with All Might, but All Might actually has to cut out shortly because All Might explains that he's gonna be a teacher at, UA. And Katsuya's excited about this and asks why he didn't say anything sooner, and All Might kinda scratches his head. I really didn't even think about it. Katsuya just rolls his eyes and heads home. After some time, eventually the letter arrives. The letter from UA. He opens the letter, and there it is. All Might himself in hologram form. Katsuya, you did amazing on the entrance exam. It looks to me you have 170 robot points. But that's not all. There's a hidden category. Hero points or rescue points. And that's exactly what you did when you saved young Ochako Uraraka. And that gives you a total of 250 points. You also got first in the exam, my boy. I am proud of you. And I'll see you in class 1A very soon. Katsuya begins jumping with joy. And during this, he kinda loses control over an explosion and blows up his TV. He kind of sits there for a second, praying that his mother didn't just hear him, until the door swings open. Katsuyu, what did you just do? I saw a bug. You broke the TV, and there is no villain in sight. Katsuya's face goes flush and begins running out as, Bakugo's mom continues chasing him.
Alright, what's up guys? It's Zedder's time to come back into this scenario and tell you all about the sponsor of today's video, Fandom. Now, Fandom is an anime merch company which you guys can go to by going down below to the link down below in my description and clicking to go to either My Hero Academia merch or all shown in anime merch. Up on screen right now, you guys should be seeing a video of just a couple of the designs that Fandom has to offer. They have a plethora of designs for anime merch apparel designs, and I would truly appreciate it if you guys were to go over to them, since they are such great people, buy some of their merch, seeing as it helps out the channel and it helps them out, seeing as they're really cool to sponsor these videos every single day, and it truly does help out the channel a lot every time one of you guys makes a purchase. With that being said, you guys can get a 10% off discount code if you guys use the code ZETHER on checkout, and make sure to make sure that if you buy something, you let me know so that I can personally thank you. With that being said though, guys, let's get back into the video. Deku at this point would run and 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 run until he literally can't no more. And at one point, his mother was actually about to catch up to him until Deku said, "Sorry, Mom," and proceeded to shoot an explosion, propelling himself all the way into the air, and said, "I'm gonna go stay at Inko's tonight," as she would say, "You get back here!" But Deku would quite literally proceed to fly off, or Katsuya would, as he would land right at Inko's doorstep. And she'd be like, "Katsuya, what are you doing here?" As Deku would say, "No time, Mom. Can I please stay over?" Inko would be like, "What is this for?" And she would immediately get a call from Inko. No, not Inko, but from Mitsuki. Mitsuki would proceed to explain to her what just happened, and Inko was just like, "Yeah, you can stay over tonight. Don't worry about it." He would say, "You can have another day on my time." And Mitsuki would not be very happy. Deku would proceed to stay over with his mom, Inko. He would watch a movie with her, and then they would proceed to fall asleep because tomorrow is Deku's big day. He's going to be entering UA as his first day. So the very next day would come around, and Izuku would wake up, or Katsuya would wake up, sorry, as Katsuya would look at his mom and be like, "Huh, it smells so good." She would immediately look at him and she says, "Well, I made you breakfast on your big day." As Katsuya would turn towards her direction and say, "Oh, thanks, Mom, you're a legend." He'd proceed to feast on this absolute amazing dinner that she cooked up for him, and he would then say, "Bye, Mom, gotta go," as he would proceed to literally grab his bag and run out of the door, as he would begin to run his way towards the train station, to which he would buy a ticket, get on, and then shortly after arrive at the gates of UA, his hero academia. Deku, seeing this gigantic school, would think, well, this is where the journey begins, as he would proceed to essentially walk towards the building. It's at this point that Deku would notice that a bunch of people are actually staring at him, and one of the girls would actually walk over to Deku, giggling, thinking that she really gets to meet Katsuya. She would say, "Hey, can I take a picture with you?" And Katsuya would smile, saying, "Sure," as he would take a picture with her, but then 4 other girls would come in and be like, "Can we take a picture with you? I mean, you train with All Might, right? So that must mean you're powerful." And Deku would be like, "Yeah." They would take pictures with him and say, "Here with the future #1 hero," as they take pictures with Katsuya, and he's smiling, thinking, "Yeah, this ain't nothing new to me." Because in Katsuya's eyes, he's always been that popular kid who's always had the attention of everybody. So when it comes to all of this stuff, this is nothing but a chicken wing. So yeah. Katsuya at this point would proceed to essentially make his way towards the UA building, where he would find a massive door. Now when he does see this door, he'd be like, "That's one big door." Deku would open the door to his classroom, as he would immediately be greeted to the sight of a young boy with blue hair and glasses, just sitting down at the desk. He would then turn towards his left, as he would then see a bunch of the girls from class 1A. Now when he sees all these girls, he would just smile and wave as he walks towards his desk, and immediately Kaminari would say, "Yo, is that Katsuya?" This would break the awkward tension in the air, as everybody would look at him and be like, "Oh my god, I think it is." They would walk over towards his direction, and people would begin to just start going crazy for him. That is, until Ida would stand up and say, "Hey, you're causing a disruption. Why don't you tell everybody to go sit down? We are waiting for the teacher." This is when a voice would be heard from the background, as it would be Aizawa, and he would say, "Settle down, problem child, and you with the blue hair. It wasn't his fault. All these people are coming towards him because he's friends with All Might or something like that," as he would say, "So sit down." He would then look towards the class, as he would say, "It took you guys 8 seconds to finally settle down. Throw these on and meet me outside." Uraraka would look at Aizawa, as she would say, "Excuse me, sir, but what about orientation?" Aizawa would look at her and say, "We have no time for orientation. We have 3 years to mold you into perfect heroes, and with that time frame, I can't afford to waste any of it." He would proceed to look at her, as she's like, "You're the teacher?" Everybody would have that same revelation happen, as Aizawa would say, "Sure am." He would step out of the sleeping bag, as Deku would smile, looking at Eraserhead, as he's like, "Always the same." He would proceed to then, unfortunately, grab his clothes and make his way towards the locker room, where he would see none other than Mineta literally standing on top of the lockers as he would be peeping into a hole. Now Deku would be like, "What are you looking at?" As out of nowhere, Mineta would be like, "Ah, it hurts." He would proceed to be like, they poked me in the eye. As Mineta would quite literally just look at Izuku, and one of his eyes would be kind of irritated from Jiro poking him with her earphone jack. At this point, Deku would begin to laugh and say that someone should seriously patch that hole up. At this point, they would all proceed to get dressed and meet Aizawa outside. Now, when they do meet Aizawa outside, he would immediately turn his attention towards Katsuya as he would throw the ball right at Deku's direction, saying, "Hey, you ended up getting the highest scores on the robot portion, so catch." He would throw a baseball right at Deku's direction as Deku would catch it and be like, "What's this?" And Aizawa would look at him saying, "Just throw the ball as far as you can. Make sure you stay in that circle." Katsuya would look at the ball as he's like, sure. He would grab the ball, grip it as tight as he could, as he would immediately charge 35% of One For All into his arm and throw the ball, getting a whopping his normal score was 750. I said his explosions were multiplied by 10. So we're actually going to say that he ends up getting a grand total of 35,000 when it comes to how far that ball went. It traveled 35,000 meters. Now, as soon as Aizawa shows this to the class, everybody would look as they would be like, "There is no way." And Deku would turn towards the class as he smiles with his hands in his pockets. The girls would be like, "He's gonna be an amazing hero." And the guys would just be like, "Must be nice. I'm trying to be like you, my boy." As at this point, we would then proceed to have the next following tests go by. The rest of the class would do the ball throwing test as everybody would then be greeted to the next test, which is the 50-meter dash. Now, as soon as that starts, Deku would literally get into the Naruto running position as he would aim his hands behind him and say, "All right, let's go." As he would jump up into the air, shoot an explosion, and clear the 50-meter dash before Ida could even register what had happened. Aizawa would do this as Ida's score would be heavily impacted by this, and when it comes to the grip strength, Deku or Katsuya was actually able to completely obliterate him, as the next thing we actually have is going to be the standing long jump. Now, when it comes to that, he would use explosions to propel himself into the air, essentially flying, and he would end up getting the highest scores when it comes to the standing long jump. When it comes to the repeated side-to-side steps, using explosions to bounce from side to side works just as well as Mineta's balls would. And when it comes to the 3 remaining tests, we would have things such as, let's say, push-ups, sit-ups, and crunches. After that, the tests are marked, and Aizawa would turn towards the class as he would say, "All right, problem children. The person who ended up being in last place is going to be Mineta. Come with me." He would tell Mineta to come with him, as Mineta would sadly be expelled. Mineta is going to be taken out of the UA course just because I really don't feel like he should have been a hero in the first place. He doesn't really contribute much to the story as it stands. So we're going to get rid of Mineta. One more thing that I did actually forget to mention is no. He has to earn his way into the classroom. I'm not just going to give it to him. I'm pretty sure you guys already know what I was about to do, but not doing it anymore. So after everybody would proceed to clear all this stuff, Deku would have a couple of drops of sweat coming down his forehead as he would wipe them off himself and then proceed to say, "So what's next, Teach?" Aizawa would proceed to say that there's nothing left for today and that they can all go home. Everybody would go to the locker rooms as they would all change, and they would end up going home in different directions. A bunch of the girls in class 1A would basically have their panties drop to the ground as soon as they see Deku proceed to take his shirt off as he's walking towards the locker room, and the guys would just be sitting there staring like, "Y'all seeing this?" Deku wouldn't be fazed at all because in his perspective, it's like he's been doing this all his life, you know what I mean? So for him, it's kind of like, I'm that guy, you know what I mean? So after that, what ends up basically happening is they all end up going home and Deku has to face the music. He ends up arriving home to Mitsuki's house, and when he does, Mitsuki would say, "Hey Katsuya," as she'd be like, "How was your day yesterday?" Now Katsuya would immediately look at his mother as she's like, "You're scarier than any villain I'll ever have to fight." As Mitsuki would say, "You're damn right." She would grab him by the ear, she starts yanking it, and she would then proceed to smack Deku across the head with a newspaper that she had in hand. As she just keeps repeatedly smacking this boy, she would then throw the paper away and start punching this man on the back of the head. As Katsuya's like, Mom, chill. She's like, why should I? He would say, I'll buy you a house when I'm rich. And she would say, a house? Katsuya would look at her, he's like, yeah, Mom, I promise, with a pool, 2 stories and everything. And she's like, I've always wanted a house. And Katsuya would say, well, I'll get you one when I get money. Just give me like 3 years. And she would immediately stop hitting him, saying, oh, this is why I love you so much. She would begin to hug him, and she's like, oh, you're suffocating me. And Mitsuki would say, nah, nonsense. She would proceed to basically smack him across the head once again, as Katsuya would start laughing awkwardly, and the next day would come around. The day at UA would be very bland, seeing as there's nothing really to cover other than Deku being this center of attention type person. And after that, what ends up essentially going down is Deku finally makes it to his final class of the day, which is Heroes 101. Now, when everybody walks into the classroom, Aizawa would actually be standing there as he says that today, the teacher is not going to be himself, but #1 hero, the symbol of peace, All Might. All Might would burst in through the door saying, I am here, walking into the door like a normal person, as he would begin to tell the class all to put on these suits because the clothes make the pros. Everybody would get extremely excited, and they would begin to immediately turn their attention towards Katsuya and All Might, as they would see All Might and Katsuya laughing about as if they're like best friends and have known each other for years. Quick thing I forgot to mention, yesterday All Might actually ended up going over for dinner at the Bakugo residence, so that was pretty good. And he ended up meeting a lot of people from Katsuya's family. Ended up actually meeting Mitsuki and Bakugo's dad. And so with that, what ends up happening is, All Might did his thing, he met the family, and now they actually are even closer than ever. So with that said, they all end up throwing on their hero suits and making their way outside. As everybody's like, are we gonna get expelled today too? All Might would clear that up and say that, oh, that was only Aizawa, and that should probably be the only time that they ever do that. Just also telling them to make sure that they're careful around Aizawa, because once he's actually expelled an entire class. As All Might would just begin to kind of like awkwardly grin, and the class would be like, yeah. As everybody would proceed to just go, and All Might would explain that today they're going to be doing combat training, or heroes versus villains training, as he would begin hyping up the classroom, telling them all that today they're going to be having quite the challenge, because they're going to be fighting each other in 1 and 2-on-2 battles, proceeding to show them all what the heroes versus villain event is all like, explaining the bomb and all that stuff, and then picking out the teams. The teams for today's little thingy-majigger is actually going to end up being Deku, or no, not Deku, but Katsuya Midoriya? Not Katsuya. Oh, I should have thought this through. Katsuya Midoriya, Katsuya Katsuki Midoriya. Yeah, that's going to be his name. He has a middle name, which is now going to be Katsuki, and last name Midoriya. So yeah, Katsuya Katsuki Midoriya. That's a mouthful. Okay, so what ends up happening after this is that All Might ends up explaining what they're going to be doing, and from here, they're all essentially assigned their own teams. Now, the team that Deku is going to be on, let's say he's going to be working with Momo Yaoyorozu. Now, when Momo is told that she's actually going to be in Deku's team, she immediately gets very shy and flustered, wondering if she's going to be able to make it. And so what ends up happening is she would look at Deku's direction, kind of look down a little with a little bit of blush on her face, as Katsuya would walk over to her and be like, what's wrong? She would say that she's a little nervous, and Katsuya would look at her saying, don't worry, I'll be there for you. As he would put his arm around her literal neck or like shoulder area, and he would proceed to say, let's go get him. Momo would immediately smile, and a bunch of the other girls would get very, very jealous, especially Uraraka. Because Uraraka thought that she kind of had something with Katsuya, seeing as he ended up saving her in the entrance exams. But nah, I still haven't decided who the shit for this is going to be, so definitely comment that down below. Might be Momo, might be Uraraka, might be, I don't know, whoever comes to my mind first. So with that said, what ends up happening after this is they end up going into the room, and what ends up happening is that Todoroki is actually going to be one of the heroes. And Katsuya and Momo are actually going to be the villains. Katsuya would ask Momo if there's any way that she can create a device with her quirk that can allow them to locate their enemies' directions. Momo would create this weird sonar device that would actually tell Deku where everybody's at, and using this device, they would already have the upper hand. They would see through the cameras that Todoroki is actually planning to just kind of freeze the entire building. And when this proceeds to happen, Momo would think that you know, it's going to probably be a best for them to avoid that. So Todoroki would freeze the entire building, and Katsuya would proceed to grab Momo as he would say, "Hold on tight," as he would proceed to shoot explosions all over the room as it would proceed to melt the ice, and Momo would be freezing as Katsuya would like hold Momo and say, "Don't worry, I got you," as he would pull Momo in close a little bit, and some of Momo's clothes is a little torn, especially from the front area. Deku would look at her direction as Momo would just look down completely blushing, and he would then proceed to be like, "Oh, sorry," as he just runs out of the room. And it's at this point that he would tell Momo to watch out for the invisible girl. As Momo's like, "What? Invisible girl?" As Katsuya would run down to see where Todoroki's at, and Todoroki would actually be completely on a different area with invisible girl. Now, as Deku would see Todoroki, he would look at him as both of them kind of just like stare down at one another, and Todoroki would shoot a geyser of ice at Deku. Deku at this moment would proceed to, or Katsuya, sorry, would proceed to shoot a gigantic explosion that would completely decimate the ice that Todoroki just shot at him. As he blitzes at Todoroki's direction, and out of instinct, Todoroki would actually shoot fire right at Deku's direction, burning half of his mask. Now, when it comes to the hero outfit that they have, it is actually going to be the Bakugo outfit, because that one's just way better than Deku's. Way better if we're just being honest with ourselves. So yeah, that's going to be his hero outfit. And when it comes to any other stuff like along that side, what ends up happening next is Deku would literally cock his fist back, throwing an explosion and punching the lights, the absolute lights out of Todoroki. Todoroki would get flung into one of the walls as his body would crash straight into it, and he would fall completely unconscious. This was not the most amazing combat spot for Todoroki to be in, seeing as he is both a close range, no, actually mostly a long range fighter, seeing as he only relies on his ice mainly. So maybe if they were to fight in the sports festival, things would be different? Question mark, question mark? Later reference? I don't know, maybe not. But what ends up happening after this is essentially Deku would walk back over towards Momo's direction in the bomb room. As it's at this point that Deku would just be standing there as Invisible Girl just actually creeped in the room with Deku. And at this point, Deku is mere inches away from losing the heroes versus villains event. Okay, so we pick up our story right where we had left off. At this point, Deku had literally just finished bodying Todoroki, and he essentially made it back to the room where Momo stands. Momo would look at Deku's direction saying, "You got him?" as Deku would smile saying that he sure did, saying that now he just needs to do one more thing. At this point, Invisible Girl would have basically been inside the room, and Deku would be right next to the bomb, literally like just a couple of feet away from it. As Deku is just laughing with Momo, at this point, Invisible Girl would think that she won. She's stepping super quietly, making sure that her breathing is really low, and Momo literally had zero idea that anybody was in the room with him currently. But Deku, yeah, you were not gonna fool him. Deku would proceed to essentially hear a couple of footsteps as he would smile, and at this point, Katsuya would proceed to literally extend his hand out as he would grab Invisible Girl by the neck, and he would quite literally throw her away as she's literally falling, and she fell right on her butt. At this point, she would pretty much be standing there as Deku would say, you know, if it wasn't me, you probably would have won. But quick thing, there's thermal sensors in this room, as he would point to a direction and there would be like a little camera there, and Deku would say, and little thing, I can also hear your breathing. She would say, but I was breathing so, as Deku would say, yeah, not quite enough. At this point, Deku would grab capture tape and begin to wrap it around her, as he would say, all right, so is that a win for us or what, All Might? Sorry guys. At this point, All Might would proceed to be like, well, that's a win for the villain side. That's a wrap, guys. Everybody get your hero suits and all this stuff, put it back where it goes, and we basically done with the day. At this point, Deku would proceed to look at Momo and say that thermal device definitely helped, as he would look at her and say that if it wasn't for that, he probably wouldn't have been able to put 2 and 2 together and figure out where she was. Lying a little bit, but you know, he got to make his teammates feel a little useful at least, seeing as she didn't really do anything. At this point, Momo would kind of like chuckle a little bit, look down at the ground shyly as she begins to twirl with her hair. And you know that motion when girls start twirling their hair, you know, they're looking down, they're looking all shy and stuff. At this point, Deku would look at her as he smiles and begins to walk off. But Momo would actually ask Deku a question as they're walking down from the building. She would say, "What are you doing later?" Deku would look at her direction saying, "Nothing much. I was actually just gonna go home to Inko's house, to my mom Inko's." As she would say, "Your mom Inko's? Do you have like a stepmom or something like that?" And Deku would say, "I guess you could say that." As at this point she'd say, "Oh, well, that's great. Well, why don't me and you hang out after school?" Katsuya would look at her as he's like, "Sure. I mean, I have nothing to do." As she would look at Deku, or Katsuya, sorry. I'm gonna be switching between Deku, Katsuya, Bakugo, them, they. Just know I'm talking about Katsuya. So at this point, Katsuya would look at her as he would say, "I mean, I'm down." And at this point, he would walk into the like room where everybody was watching everything, as everyone's just like, "Dude, that was awesome." They'd be like, "The way you grabbed Hagakure, what's her name, Invisible Girl, the way you grabbed the Invisible Girl, that was so manly," obviously coming from Kirishima. And the rest of the students would basically just be hyping Deku up this entire time. Deku at this point would smile as he thinks that coming to UA was the best choice he's ever made. And Mina would actually walk over towards Deku's direction as she's like, "What you doing after school, Katsuya?" As he would say, "Oh, I'm gonna go to the mall with Momo." Immediately, a couple of the girls would say, "Oh, can we come?" As at this point, Momo would look at them with that stare of like, "Y'all know what you're doing." And they would look at her back like, "You're not getting any points with Katsuya. Like that's my man." You know what I mean? So Momo would give them the weird stares, and Deku would kind of just see everything and be like, I mean, I don't see why not." Immediately, a bunch of the guys like Kirishima and Kaminari would say, "Where are you guys going?" As Katsuya is just like, "The mall, you know, we're just gonna go chill." And they're like, "Can we tag along? I actually gotta go buy myself a shirt and some jeans." As Katsuya is just like, "I mean, sure, let's make it a group thing." As he would begin to look at the rest of the classroom being like, "Any of you guys want to tag along?" And a bunch of the people who are more like on the quiet side would be like, "Nah, I'm good, man." But more of the like extroverted people, like outgoing ones in class 1A, are all the people who end up going, Uraraka included, by the way. At this point, everybody would get all their money and stuff like that, and what ends up happening is Deku would go home as he would end up going to Mama Inko's crib, and she would feed this man a whole feast. At this point, Deku would devour it, and he would pretty much say thank you, as she would give Katsuya a huge hug and say, "No, thank you, Izuku." She would proceed to say, "So what do you got planned today?" As Katsuya would be like, "Well, I was gonna go train with All Might, but I guess now I'm gonna go hang out with my classmates." Seeing as we've barely known each other for about 3 days, I think it's about time that I got to know them a little better. Inko would look at Katsuya as she's just like, "Well, that's a great idea, honey." She's putting the dishes, you know, in the dishwasher, and she would say, "I hope you have fun." Immediately, Katsuya would go over towards his room as he would begin to get changed, and he would proceed to, let's see, what outfit would go good with him. Oh, one thing that I've never I'm gonna cut that out. One thing that I've never mentioned is the fact that Deku or Katsuya, what he looks like. Now, in case some of you guys are wondering what Katsuya looks like, he essentially has mostly Bakugo's features in the face, and when it comes to the hair, he has like black hair because he ended up dyeing it, because after the transformation happened, didn't quite really like his hair. It was blonde with green and it just looked strange. So he ended up dyeing his hair, and what ends up happening is now Katsuya has this like black hair. So he looks like a perfect mixture of Deku and Bakugo in the face. Black hair, pretty toned body, and he's actually on the more of the taller side. So at this point, he's a good solid 5'9", let's say 5'9", 5'10", 5'10" with shoes, 5'9" normally. And so, you know, he's a pretty decent height. So at this point, Katsuya would proceed to just look through his closet. As he sees this like beige bomber, he would grab that, a white shirt, black jeans, and some white sneakers that he had. As he would throw that on, put on some blue de Chanel, and then proceed to throw on a chain, a watch, and dip out the room. At this point, he would go outside as Momo's actually outside with a limo, and Katsuya's just like, a limo? And she's like, yeah, get in. Immediately, everybody would be in the car and they're having a blast. It's more like a party limo, I guess you could say, as all of them are just having a great time, and Momo is really close to Deku. At this point, Mina would actually see this and start getting a little closer than, Momo would like. And Momo seeing this is just like, oh, nah, now he got me messed up. But at this point, more and more people would begin to get closer to Deku, and Momo would actually end up on the outskirts of everything, not even being as close as she would have liked to being to Deku. So what ends up happening is they end up finally arriving to the mall, and once they get there, everybody wants to split up. Uraraka's actually looking at her pockets thinking, oh, I don't really have too much spending money. So they would immediately arrive to a Retzel's Pretzels as they're all just thinking about what they're going to get, and Uraraka would say, oh, no, she's good, as Deku walks over towards her direction saying, come on, I got you. Uraraka would be like, oh, no, don't worry, I don't want any. And Katsuya would look at her just being like, you sure? Immediately, like, her face would turn a little red, indicating, yeah, she wants some, but she's just not gonna get any. So Katsuya looking at her would just be like, come on, let's go get you something. And Uraraka would smile, thinking that was such a kind gesture. At this point, he would buy her whatever what she wanted, and everybody would have a grand old time, just going shopping, bonding as a classroom, and getting to know each other individually from like more of a better like person-to-person basis. So what ends up happening after this is this whole group thing turns out to be a pretty fun experience for everybody. As soon as Momo got over the fact that she was just trying to be with Deku, she actually ended up having a lot of fun with some of her classmates. Not necessarily a lot of the girls, because most of them were actually trying to get at Katsuya, and she didn't like that. So what ends up actually happening is that the class would actually have a little bit of a bond after this event, and about 1 week would pass where most of the people in class 1A are having a pretty chill bond with each other. You know what I mean? Momo is the one who's especially on Izuku's breadstick, if you get what I'm putting down. She's the one that really wants to, devour this man. So she's kind of a little bit of a yandere, I'm not gonna lie. In this version, I may have tweaked her character to be a little bit more on the obsessive side. So yeah, that's what ends up happening. And she's a little jealous of a couple of girls, mainly Mina and Uraraka, because if you guys do remember, Uraraka did end up being saved by Deku, so her and Izuku or Katsuya are on pretty good terms with each other. And what ends up happening is that, they all end up hanging out together as much as they frequently can. And all of this happening until Aizawa would finally say on one particular day, everybody get these papers signed, we're gonna go to the USJ tomorrow, just get the paper signed, meet me at school tomorrow, and we're gonna be gone all day. So they would all go home with these papers in hand, and Deku, or Katsuya, would bring the papers towards Mitsuki, as he would say, can you sign this? We're gonna go on the USJ. She would immediately say Universal Japan Studios, and Deku would say, no, it's actually something from UA. She would say, oh, sure, as she would sign the papers and say, you better become a hero soon, because I need that house that you promised. As Katsuya would be like, yeah, mom, don't worry about it. He would proceed to go out, and at this point, he would look at the paper, as on the bottom, he would see a pretty strange note. But at this point, he would kind of disregard that, as he would walk towards his closet and be like, what do I wear tomorrow? He would see this one hoodie. Now, this hoodie would be from a particular brand, and the tag just says fandom. He throws it on, and it's a really nice looking Zoro hoodie. When Deku, or Katsuya, when Katsuya is wearing this, he would go outside, and at this point, he would just proceed to chill for the rest of the day. Until finally, the next day would arrive, and they would all be on the bus, on the way to the USJ. Now, when they're all on the bus, they're all essentially discussing who the strongest in the classroom is. And a lot, and I mean a lot of people would actually be saying that the strongest would definitely have to be Katsuya. A couple others would say that it might be Todoroki, but they would say that that argument was already put to rest the second that Katsuya and Todoroki ended up fighting in the heroes versus villains. Todoroki, overhearing this, would kind of grudgingly just think that he made a fool out of him and that won't happen again. As Katsuya's just kind of smiling as he would look at the class and say, I mean, Todoroki's pretty powerful as well. I don't know if that battle would have gone the same way had it been in an open area. With Todoroki thinking that he's absolutely right, that battle wouldn't have gone the same way in an open field. Katsuya and everybody would finally end up arriving at the location of the USJ, and when they do, they would immediately be told by Ida to go outside in a formal line. Actually, no, they wouldn't be told by Ida. They would actually be told by Katsuya because he's going to be the class rep. Katsuya would be like, hey everybody, let's just go outside and get into a formal line. Everybody would do so immediately, even faster than Ida could make them do so. And at this point, Katsuya would just be like chilling there as he is just having a pretty good old time. Now, Katsuya would walk into the USJ as immediately they're all greeted to the pro hero 13. 13 would begin to explain to everybody what the USJ is, the unforeseen simulation joint, and how they will all be training for learning how to, react to unforeseen events, such as catastrophes. And so all of them would begin to look around as out of nowhere a purple mist would arrive and it would say, sorry to crash the party. Immediately, Kirishima would look at that direction saying, whoa, you guys didn't tell me you guys were going to be throwing villains in the mix. And immediately, Aizawa would react by saying, that's not a fake villain. He would jump towards Kurogiri with Kirishima actually right next to him, jumping at the villain as they proceed to go through it. And immediately, Katsuya would realize what's going on with the situation. He would proceed to create a smoke screen as he would blast up into the air, creating so much dust, and Kurogiri's blinded. He would teleport different directions, trying to see where everybody's at, but Katsuya would actually end up grabbing a good amount of people, two people in each hand. He would grab Uraraka, Momo, Suyu, and Mineta got expelled, and Koda, as he just grabs all four of them and essentially gets them away from that area. Immediately, he would throw a big explosion at the gate, the door that's pretty much keeping them there. And he would look at Ida's direction saying, Ida, you gotta go get All Might now. Immediately, Ida is just like, why should I listen to you? But, that just kind of goes away a little bit because he's a little salty that Katsuya ended up winning class rep. But he would proceed to run as fast as he can, and Kurogiri would teleport everybody away as far as he could. Immediately, Kurogiri would look at Katsuya's direction and think that that kid's gonna be a problem. But Katsuya would remain there with all the four people that he saved as he would blast off towards Aizawa's direction, and he would begin to cause mayhem for the villains. He would begin to destroy villains left and right, shooting explosions at them, taking out big swarms of them at a time. And by about 2 minutes in, all the villains that Aizawa had to fight against for a long time were actually cleared way faster than originally. So Aizawa is actually having a pretty good tag team match against all these villains, and Katsuya is just helping a whole ton when it comes to the USJ situation. At this point, Shigaraki would begin to scratch his neck saying, it's not fair, he cheated, as he would begin to say, Kurogiri, bring out the Nomu. At this point, Katsuya would look as this gigantic black bird looking thing with a brain at the top of its head would step out as it would roar to the heavens and begin to essentially rush straight at Katsuya's direction after Shigaraki said, kill the brats. Katsuya would actually literally get almost punched if it wasn't for his instantaneous reaction. He would just barely be able to dodge out of the way as he would blast up into the air, but the Nomu would jump up right after him as it would bring its hands up and go for a smash to try to just slam Katsuya, back into the ground. Katsuya's body would quite literally ricochet on the ground as he bounces back up from the force, coughing out like blood and spit at the same time, as Katsuya would just shoot an explosion to narrowly dodge as the Nomu would have came down to try to crush him. At this point, Katsuya would think that this is not the time to be playing games, and he would immediately decide that he needs to push himself beyond what he usually can. At this point, Katsuya would activate 40% of One For All as he would muster one of the biggest explosions that he possibly could. Katsuya would rush at the Nomu as he would say, Howitzer! Impact! He blitzing at the Nomu, he would shoot him with a very, very powerful Howitzer impact. And what he actually ends up saying is not exactly just howitzer impact, but he would say 40% howitzer impact, just rushing at the Nomu's direction like a spiral, like a spiraling drill. And at this point, he would shoot the gigantic explosion that is like absolutely huge, which would cause a bunch of dirt to go up into the air. But the Nomu would quite literally have a bunch of its skin like torn, but it would still be standing there because of the shock absorption. At this point, Katsuya would be in absolute shock, and the Nomu would actually have Katsuya's hand literally gripped by its arm, which is blown into bits and pieces, and bones and like burnt skin is all that's remaining. The Nomu would then screech as slowly it would begin its regeneration process, and Katsuya would just be thrown aback by how much punishment this Nomu was able to receive without just completely falling and like just being done. Katsuya would try to get free, and it's at this point that he would say, "Let go!" At this point, some black tendrils would come out of his other hand as it would shoot towards the direction of the Nomu, and it would shoot the Nomu a great amount of distance away from Katsuya. At this point, Katsuya would have these tendrils go haywire as it would actually begin to go crazy, this being Black Whip. And Black Whip would begin to go haywire all over the place as Katsuya is struggling to control his quirk that he just recently got, and he is just not having a very fun time. The Nomu would be gripped by one of Black Whip's tendrils, and Katsuya would just barely be able to push it all back in. However, when he does so, the Nomu would be like literally flung right into Katsuya's direction as he would shoot an AP shot straight into the Nomu's stomach, as it would create a gigantic hole into the Nomu, but the Nomu would begin regenerating very, very quickly. At this point, Katsuya would proceed to just look at Shigaraki's direction as he's laughing, saying, "It doesn't matter what you do to the Nomu, it has regeneration, shock absorption. This thing was made to kill All Might." Now, as soon as Katsuya hears that, he thinks, "Oh, All Might?" As the Nomu would begin to unleash a bunch of punishment on Katsuya, and Katsuya would actually be shocked by just how much damage this Nomu was able to handle. These explosions are not normal Bakugo level explosions. They're literally Bakugo's explosions times 10 plus the amp of 40% one for all. You can imagine how powerful these explosions are. They're literally the sizes of one of Bakugo's big giant explosion that he did in the USJ. Multiply that by 20. That's how big these explosions are, but he's able to actually compact them. He's even able to create a nuclear explosion, which is something he never ever tries to use because the splash damage is just too insane. But Katsuya would begin to think that's the only way. He has to destroy every cell on this thing's body for it to finally give in and lose. And at this point, Katsuya would lunge into the air as he would quite literally fly as high as he can, aim his hands upwards as he would begin to shoot down at the ground and say, "Nuclear! 1,000,000% explosion!" as he just comes down spiraling. And this explosion would be so massive. A white light would go through the entire USJ, and as this happens, All Might would be on his way to the USJ. At this point, Deku would have decimated, obliterated the Nomu, and what ended up happening next was Katsuya quite literally got folded. This man, not him, but the Nomu got folded like an omelet. It was dust. There was nothing left of the Nomu. And at this point, Katsuya would stand weakly as he looks at Shigaraki's direction, and Kurogiri would have actually been shielding Shigaraki away, because had that explosion had any splash damage effect on Shigaraki, he would have been destroyed along with him. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, that explosion was contained about as much as you can get, but the villains that were around, they had serious, severe 4th degree burns and were flung very, very far. So the villains, they're not in the best shapes of their lives. But Katsuya, would look at Shigaraki's direction as he would shoot an explosion towards Shigaraki, as he would blitz at Shigaraki's direction, quite literally shooting an explosion so powerful, almost all of Shigaraki's clothes quite literally got blown off in the explosion, and he got sent flying. Luckily, however, Kurogiri was there to catch Shigaraki inside a portal, and the last thing that Shigaraki would see is Katsuya standing there with one of his arms quite literally broken and like standing there almost in the same All Might pose that he had whenever he fought against All For One. At this point, All Might would come in with that same look on his face of anger as he looks towards the direction of his successor Katsuya with his arm down, almost mangled, and a villain just being thrown right into a warp gate. All Might would kind of smile as he would look at his successor's direction and say that this has been one of your very first trials. I hope that you can continue to do this with more things down the road. I may not always be there to protect you, young Midoriya or young Katsuya. As at this point, he would quite literally just run over towards Katsuya's direction as he would fall over and catch him. And Katsuya would look at All Might saying, "Finally made it, old man." He would cough a little bit and be like, "I'm glad you're here," as he would quite literally proceed to pass out. At this point, what would happen next is Shigaraki would get out of there. The villain cleaning up stuff would all happen. And at this point, Katsuya would literally be taken away in a hospital stretcher. Now, it's really not as deep as it seems. Recovery Girl would simply just give Katsuya a kiss, and in about 1 day of just having his arm in a cast, his arm would fully recover. After that happens, what would end up actually going down is they're all informed about having a 1 complete full break without school in order to simply get their minds in check and forget about this horrible situation. Oh, and quick thing, if during this video I sound like I have a straight up DICK up my nose, I'm sorry, but I'm battling demons with the allergies that I'm having right now. So if that's a problem, I do heavily apologize. That being said, what would end up happening afterwards is Katsuya would essentially end up making his way towards the park. Now, when Katsuya is actually at this park, a girl would show up. Now, this girl would have black hair, pretty long by the way, and she would show up in some leggings and a little cute crop top, I guess. I don't know, just whatever's there, you know what I mean? Now, this person would obviously be Momo Yaoyorozu. Now, when Momo arrives, she would look at Katsuya's direction saying, "What a coincidence, you're at this park too." As Katsuya would be like, "What? You're here?" Just questioning Momo, being like, "Why are you at this old dump? Like, I'd expect you to go to a much better park than this." As she's like, "No, I've always came to this park since I was a little girl." Literally making up a lie just so that it seems like she's there by coincidence and not because she just like completely tracked Katsuya down to get some alone time with him. And at this point, Katsuya would quite literally just be scrolling through his social media, reading all of his latest comments, asking if there's any updates with training with All Might. Deku would upload a picture of him and All Might kind of sticking their tongues out with their fists, like in front of them, as like a cool little Instagram post that he just kind of had to kind of let people know that, you know, he's doing all right. And at this point, everybody would be very happy, and the media actually didn't end up finding out or blowing the USJ incident out of proportion. What ends up happening is a lot of people would question what happened with all that, but Deku would give very limited information. Now, Katsuya and Momo would essentially be sitting on these swing sets as they're just having a little bit of a talk. And it's at this point that Katsuya would actually realize Momo's actually a pretty chill girl. Like, before, he never truly had thought about it, but Momo actually does genuinely seem like a pretty decent human being. And so, at this point, he and Momo would continue conversing, and Momo would eventually bring up the big question, "You want to go somewhere?" At this point, Katsuya would be like, "Sure, why not? I don't have anything to do today." And at this point, they would proceed to quite literally hang out for that entire week. He would message Momo back and forth, and Katsuya and Izuku himself would proceed to just kind of hang out during those entire days. During that time, obviously Katsuya did some light training and sparring with All Might. However, most of his time when he wasn't doing any of that was quite literally spent with Katsuya. At this point, what would end up happening is he would continue talking to Momo, and they would continue building more and more of a relationship during this 1 week off. During this time, Katsuya would be thinking that, you know, they're just flirting it up a little bit, but that they're just like basically friends, because at this point, he hasn't even kissed Momo yet. but he's been having such a good time with Momo. You know what I mean? Like, he's been doing his thing, Momo's happy, and she's thinking that they are already a couple. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had this, but where you're talking to someone and you're not a couple, but you're also like not also talking to other people in flirty ways, I guess you could say. Like you're not a couple, but you also let people know that you're not out for the take, you know what I mean? So what ends up essentially happening is Katsuya would finally end up going back to class after this 1 week would finally be over. And when he does return, what ends up happening is immediately a bunch of the girls from class 1A would begin to like just jump on this man Katsuya and be like, oh my god, this and that. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I cut the video and I completely forgot where I was, so I'm just gonna kind of pick up from nowhere. I had to blow my nose really badly, and I ended up just cutting it like mid-sentence. So whatever I was saying, a lot of the girls are pretty much flirting it up with Katsuya, and Momo, let's just say she doesn't take too kindly to any of that whatsoever. So what ends up essentially happening is Katsuya and Momo end up being pulled to the side. Momo pulls Katsuya to the side and begins to question Katsuya on what he thinks he's doing. Like, she would begin to tell Katsuya that she thought that they were building something special, saying that why are you flirting with all these girls? And Katsuya would be like, but we're not, as he's like, I'm just talking to my classmates, can I not do that? He would begin to see that Momo is a little crazy, and he would literally walk away from her being like, yeah, I'm gonna give you some time. Are you on your days? As Momo gets enraged, but she just simply puts on a smile and says that she doesn't know what she's thinking about. She was just being crazy, trying to get Deku, or Katsuya, sorry, to think that she might not be as crazy as Katsuya's thinking. So Katsuya would go back, and at this point Aizawa would walk into the classroom and tell everybody, all right, listen up everybody. Today, you guys will now have 1 day. Starting from today is your only day to prepare for the UA Sports Festival, which will be held tomorrow. He would look at the class as he begins to essentially explain what the USJ even is, saying that the USJ is an opportunity for all of the students to showcase all of their abilities and be put in for internships, where they will be gaining more and more experience for the world that lies ahead. Everybody would get very hype, Uraraka being the most hype out of all of them, saying, let's do this! And her radiant energy would honestly just be like going throughout the classroom as a whole. And obviously, nothing really would end up happening during this time period. All that really does end up occurring is... Okay. Quick intermission in the video. Editing's out of here. This is a lot of days after I just recorded that previous part. On the last snippet that you guys heard, like the previous 8 to 10 minutes, I quite literally sounded like I had a genuine a rod that guys have up my nose, like just shoved in there to the deepest part that I could possibly get to. So I just genuinely want to say I am so sorry guys that I had you guys listening to that, and I just let it happen, but I cannot be bothered to record that part. So please bear with me for that part, and let's get back into the story. Okay, they have the rest of class, and from there they basically all end up essentially going home. Now on this day, all of them are pretty much hyped, telling all their families and parents that they are going to be holding the UA Sports Festival very soon. And obviously with that comes a lot of people being very hype about it, you know what I mean? Everybody's fiending to do a really good job the next day. And so when Katsuya goes home, he looks at Mitsuki and she's like, so boy, what did you do at school today? Katsuya walks over to her and says, well, you'll be happy to hear it because tomorrow you're actually going to see me in action. Mitsuki would be like, what? I'll see you in action, as Katsuya explains about the USJ, and she's like, I mean the UA Sports Festival, and she immediately calls Inko and says, Inko, tomorrow we gotta go watch our boy at the sports festival. Inko's like, oh my god, I get to watch Katsuya? As you know, they're both geeked over this, and at this point Katsuya is basically just pretty happy at the fact that both of his moms can now finally get along, because at the beginning things were very patchy. Like when I say patchy, I mean it. Like Mitsuki and Inko had a very hard time sharing Izuku at the very beginning of this amazing little relationship that they all share together. That being said though, guys, the way that all of this essentially ends up playing out is Katsuya and everybody else ends up finally making it to the UA Sports Festival arena. Now when they're all there, they're obviously changed into their PE outfits, and when they're all looking around, Katsuya just sitting there in the back just thinking, wow, there's a lot of people here. Katsuya would also just be thinking in his head like, yeah, this is gonna be pretty easy though, because it's like, I mean, he has explosions and all this stuff, so he kind of knows that like he got it like that, I guess you could say. So if you guys were like in his perspective, essentially he's just kind of like pretty confident about everything and he's genuinely happy. With that though, obviously Midnight would come in and she would begin to be all like, all right guys, so are you guys ready? You know what I mean? She'd start hyping them all up, and at this point she would say, our student Katsuya Midoriya is going to be coming up to speak on the podium. As Katsuya would pretty much just walk over towards Midnight, give a pretty lit speech, and everybody would go berserk. They'd be like, oh my god, it's Katsuya! Ah! You know what I mean? Like they're all having a pretty good time thinking that, you know, Katsuya is all this and that. Because if you guys don't remember, he is a little bit, just a teeny tiny bit Instagram, Snapchat, and YouTube famous because he uploads clips of him training with All Might. And all of them already know how powerful he is, or think that they know, but they've only seen little snippets of how strong he can be. So with that, the crowd finally goes silent after like Midnight is able to calm everybody down by saying that they need to, you know, calm down before the next event would start. After this, everybody, and I mean everybody, would quite literally go towards the starting line as they all pretty much just get into their starting positions. And from here, we would have a countdown. 3, 2, 1. The starting pistol would blast and everybody would begin to go as fast as they possibly can. Immediately, Katsuya would look at Todoroki's direction and in a split second would decide that he needs to blast off immediately. Todoroki would shoot his ice as a bunch of people would get stopped, but Katsuya, however, would actually blast up into the air and begin to spin like a literal torpedo. As he proceeds to hold one hand out and say, let's try this again, a 0-pointer would stand right before him as Katsuya would say, 1,000,000%! Howitzer! Impact! He would blast into the gigantic robot, busting a huge hole in it and causing a combustion of all of the other robots to just explode. Everybody who's behind, including Todoroki, would get blown back by this immense heat and like just explosion as Katsuya would blast off smiling. He would have little tiny compressed explosions blasting behind himself as he's propelling himself as fast as he possibly can. Now, each one of these explosions is about the size of a genuine house, so they are massive, meaning Katsuya is very, very fast. Not only that, but he also has full cowling, so he quite literally, whenever he doesn't land on an explosion, he just jumps on the ground and jumps back up as he shoots more and more explosion. So when I say my man Katsuya is basically winning, he's pretty much just winning. After this, he ends up clearing literally all of the obstacles, and from here everybody else finally ends up making it towards the little finish line. Todoroki ended up getting second place, Ida third, and the rest you guys can pretty much just organize it however you guys would want. With that said though, what ends up going down after this is Midnight announces that they will now be having cavalry battles, as all everybody in like the stage area would pretty much just be told to essentially like pick partners, and then they're going to be having the little event. As soon as that happens, Katsuya is actually going to be bombarded with a bunch of people who actually want to be on his team, mainly girls. But what Katsuya would actually end up doing is saying that he definitely wants Momo on his team. So that's the first person who he ends up choosing. After this, he would end up choosing Uraraka. And after that, he would end up choosing one more person. This being Mei Hatsume, after she bombarded him saying, please let me show off my babies on your team. You know, she started saying all this and that. And at the end of everything, he was like, all right, whatever. Seeing as there's no Deku here or Bakugo or Deku or Bakugo here, and it's like mixture of like Deku, it has all of their quirks, all of their intelligence and all that stuff. So he ends up coming with a strategy of using Hatsume's stuff to pretty much have something very similar to what they did in canon. However, one thing that they would do is have Momo create this gigantic like seating thing, like a saddle, I guess you could say, that he would use to ride on top of the 3 people that will be carrying him. and he also created something so that his explosions could be funneled and he won't be causing any fire friendly damage, you know what I mean? So as soon as the match starts, Todoroki would immediately try to lunge over towards Katsuya's direction. But what would end up happening is Katsuya would actually proceed to shoot a giant explosion at Todoroki's direction, which would almost cause Todoroki to be blown off of his carriage thing. And after seeing another team actually fall, he would notice that that team got eliminated immediately. So Todoroki ended up realizing that unless he wants to get eliminated, he should probably wait to fight Katsuya in the next battle. So he would proceed to start collecting a bunch of other headbands, and Katsuya would start getting bombarded by weaker characters who he was able to knock down pretty easily. At one point, he pretty much ended up establishing that nobody was going to touch him, and that's kind of how that first portion of the battles go. After this, the other second years and third years are the ones who end up going up to the competition, and they're all essentially told that they're all going to be needing to essentially, let's see, they're all pretty much going to be needing to like clear out, because they're going to be holding the second year and third year stuff, and so everybody would pretty much clear out. Now, when everybody does end up clearing out, they essentially see this giant billboard on the roof, and they look up there, and Katsuya's like, what does that say? Now, at this point, it would quite literally be a picture of All Might with a smile on his face and him literally pointing towards his shirt. Now, this shirt would be made out of very, very fine material from Fandom, the sponsor of today's video. Now guys, if you guys haven't heard about Fandom, which obviously you guys probably have, seeing as you've probably seen a couple of my videos, and if you guys have seen the previous parts, you know exactly what Fandom is. Up on screen right now should be a bunch of videos essentially showing a bunch of the products that Fandom has to offer to you guys. They offer a variety of options from a heck of a ton of shonen anime which you guys can choose from. They have all the popular stuff like MHA, Naruto, Demon Slayer, they have 7 Deadly Sins. They pretty much have everything you guys can think of. And not only that, but they're not only anime merch apparel website. You can even buy yourself some nice little Spider-Man merch or Marvel stuff, because they sell a ton of things. It's not just limited to anime. So please go down below, use code ZETHER at checkout for an extra 10% off. And with that being said, let's get back into the story. So with that said, guys, what ends up essentially happening is all of them see the sign, and you know, Katsuya is like, yeah, I have a hoodie by them. They're actually pretty good. They all end up walking off, and they're like, you know, pretty cool. And Katsuya would end up breaking the fourth wall as he says, seriously, go buy Fandom. It helps the channel out a lot. Okay, bye. As everybody would end up leaving, and at this point, Katsuya would be in the waiting room, where of course Todoroki would come in and would begin to tell him how he's basically going to crush Katsuya. Katsuya, hearing this, would just let out a little bit of laughter, as he simply thinks that there's no way that Icy Hot truly thinks he has what it takes to beat him. Katsuya would smile and think that, well, I mean, I guess anybody can really dream. As Katsuya would proceed to essentially like just have a pretty good time, and he ends up just looking at Todoroki's direction, you know what I mean? Todoroki would give him like an angry look, but Katsuya would not mind this, and he would proceed to essentially like just kind of stay where he's at and sip on his apple juice, because why not? Now at this point, Katsuya would be sitting in the lounge room, and Katsuki and Mitsuki, no, not Katsuki, but Mitsuki and Inko would bust into the room being like, Katsuya! And they're both wearing shirts that say Katsuya on them, and they bust in and they're like, you're doing so great, you know what I mean? They start pretty much telling him that he's doing this well and that they're so proud of him, and Katsuya's just letting out these awkward little laughs, you know what I mean? Like, he's literally being squeezed to death by two moms, and he's just sitting there like, yeah. Now at this point, Hisashi and you know, Mitsuki's husband are just standing there by the door, just looking at Katsuya just get bombarded by hugs, and Katsuya's like, hey guys, as they're just like, what's up? And at this point they say, brought you some snacks, as Katsuya is quite literally given a bunch of Mexican candy, and he proceeds to gobble 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 gobble, as he proceeds to eat all that stuff, and he cannot take the heat. He proceeds to grab milk and chug on that thing. He's like, too spicy. No, I'm just playing. But seriously though, he does drink some milk because it was a little too spicy. But after that, what ends up happening is he ends up going towards the arenas, where the first match is announced. Katsuya Midoriya versus Hitoshi Shinso or something like that. I think that's Shinso's name. Anyways, that out of the way, what ends up essentially happening is Katsuya ends up hearing wind of what Shinso's quirk is, because of the fact that Ojiro ended up, of course, telling him that he talked to him, and from there he doesn't remember what happened. So Katsuya is simply thinking that he might have to just not say a word to Shinso. So as soon as the match starts, not even to like try to elongate this or anything, or to try to breeze by this, what would pretty much just happen is Katsuya would think, hey, if he talked to him and something bad happened, I won't talk to him and I'll be cautious. He proceeds to blast an explosion towards Shinso's direction. Shinso was thrown off guard before he could even say anything, and Katsuya proceeded to throw an explosion, launching Shinso into the grassy area, where he then lands and starts pounding on the ground, thinking, damn it! As, you know, he's simply thinking that there's no way he'll make it into the UA like hero course anymore. And Katsuya would walk over towards Shinso as he would ask, what's your quirk? Shinso would begin to look at, Katsuya as like, what do you care? As he walks off, and Katsuya would simply think that, my bad, as he proceeds to walk off, and the next battles would all happen. At this point, the next battle would be announced, and it would actually be Katsuya Midoriya versus Shoto Todoroki. We pick up our story right where I had left off in the last part. And with that, we start off with a battle against Shinso Todoroki versus Katsuya Midoriya. So what ends up happening here is Katsuya is pretty much in the waiting room when Momo walks in, and she proceeds to essentially wish Katsuya luck. She proceeds to tell him that, even though she was a little bit mad at him before, that she was just overreacting a little bit. And Katsuya says that don't worry, like he pretty much understands. From here, Momo would give Katsuya a hug and a kiss, and she would pretty much go on to tell Katsuya that she loves him. From here, Katsuya would smile, and he would then go outside to the arena, where Todoroki would be there waiting for him. Before the battle starts, he would say that he's only going to be using half of his power in order to defeat him. And Katsuya would laugh as he would say, half of your power to defeat me? Todoroki would look at him and say, what's so funny? I don't need my fire to defeat you. As he would say, I'm gonna show that damn old man. But before he can even finish his sentence, Katsuya would stop him and say, you're hilarious. If you're not gonna use your full power, then I won't either. As immediately he would say, full cowling, 55%. As his body would begin to pretty much crackle with electricity that can actually be visible to everybody that's watching, as they're like, whoa. Now this electricity, instead of being green, would actually be a blue color. As at this point, Katsuya would look at the direction of Todoroki, and before Todoroki even got a chance to literally react at Katsuya's movements, Katsuya would punch him in the gut before Todoroki got to slam his foot onto the ground and create a gigantic pool of ice. From here, Katsuya would punch him in the gut, saying bam, and from here, his gut punch would quite literally send Todoroki flying out of the arena. But that's when Katsuya would blitz right in front of him and catch him with Black Whip, as he would then proceed to swing him in the air, jump up as high as he can, and then slam him onto the ground in Spider-Man-like fashion, so that Todoroki's body quite literally would ricochet off of the stadium ground. And then he would proceed to grab Todoroki by the hair and say, don't play yourself. As he would walk off of the arena, and people would remain silent until at this point people would walk over to Todoroki and say, he's fine, like he's unconscious but he's fine. People would then start freaking out, being like, oh my god, Katsuya, you know what I mean, like they're going crazy. And from here, Katsuya would just smile and wave as he walks over towards the waiting area. From here, he would pretty much be getting ready to have his final battle, and since there is no such thing as Katsuki Bakugo, the person who Katsuya would end up having to fight is going to be Tokiyami. So this battle is actually going to be an interesting one, I would say, if it wasn't for the fact that Katsuya has the literal only counter to Tokiyami's Dark Shadow. Not only that, but it is actually daytime at the current time that they're going to be fighting. So if I'm being completely honest with myself, I don't really see this fight going anywhere. So instead, what I am going to be having happen during this fight is Katsuya would immediately start off the battle by creating a giant amount of smoke so that Tokiyami is actually not visible to Katsuya. From here, he would proceed to use his blinding speeds to blitz before Tokiyami, and Dark Shadow would appear just in time. However, he would shoot an explosion, causing Tokiyami to back away, and from here, since,
Katsuya has nothing against Tokiyami, he would proceed to quite literally just smack him and throw him out of the arena, as Tokiyami pretty much gets dragged all out of the arena. And from here, Katsuya is just in the middle, as everybody's like, Katsuya! As, you know, Prison Mike would be like, and the winner of the sports festival is Katsuya Katsuki Midoriya! As everybody's just going haywire. Katsuya is like the center of attention, and from here, this is when Katsuya would be given his medal of being, well, the winner. Tokiyami would be given a second place and Todoroki third, as that would pretty much conclude the entirety of the, of the sports festival. So with that said, what ends up happening here is after, you know, Katsuya's pretty much given his medal, we would basically have it to which Uraraka would run up to Midoriya and pretty much give him a big ol' hug, congratulating him for his win. Mina would come in and say, yeah, congratulations. And a bunch of the guys from Class 1A would say, dude, you did a great job. Momo would be watching, and she was basically coming over to give, you know, Katsuya pretty much like a gift, saying like, oh, like you did such a great job. But when she sees this, she would be enraged. From here, she would walk away, and what usually happens here is about 1 week of internships, which will still be going down. However, with a little bit of a twist, because instead of having some internships be the plot line of this 1 week, I actually thought of a little bit of a tsundere plot that I wanted to make up in my head, seeing as I just finished watching a tsundere anime. So why not? So what ends up happening here is basically all of the people from Class 1A would end up making their way towards the classroom. It would currently be a Friday, and from here, all of them would now be in their desk for the final class of the day, Heroes Training, when until Aizawa would say, alright, problem children, today you're going to be picking your hero names. Midnight's going to be helping you guys out with that since I'm not any good. He would quite literally go into his sleeping bag, pass out, and from here, everybody in the class would turn their attention towards Midnight, as she would walk in and say, so guys, what are you guys gonna pick for your hero names? From here, what would end up happening is everybody would proceed to pick their hero names. Now, when it comes to Katsuya, he would pick the name Dynamite. That is the name that Katsuya wants to go with, because it's just the coolest name. He's not gonna go with Katsuya as his hero name. It's gonna be Dynamite. Homage to his, you know, symbol of peace and his favorite hero, All Might, plus the fact that he's literally an explosion, so it's just perfect for him. That being said, after class would end, he would try to walk over to Momo and ask her what's wrong, because she hasn't texted him, she hasn't talked to him ever since he won in the sports festival after she said she loved him. So Katsuya would be very confused at that, and he would confront Momo, but she would quite literally play it off, and from here would act as if nothing happened. So Katsuya would pretty much walk over towards Momo at the end of class, and everybody's pretty much just watching this at this point, as Katsuya would say, I don't know what your deal is, Momo. It's like you're bipolar. One day you're the greatest person in the world, and the next sorry guys, and the next day you're just giving me a cold shoulder and causing problems. Why is that? Do you not know how you feel about me, or what? Momo would say, oh, I know about how I feel about you, but you know what I don't feel, what doesn't feel right? Whenever you get hugged up on by other girls. As Momo would immediately look at Uraraka, give her an angry stare, as Uraraka just like backs up a little bit and is like, okay. From here though, Katsuya would look at Momo and just be like, I don't know what you're going on about. But from here, Momo would just be like, yeah, I bet you don't. So what would end up pretty much going down is Katsuya would end up pretty much just being like, well, I can't handle this anymore. We're done, Momo. I'm not going to be in this toxic relationship. As he walks off, and everybody in the class is just like, oh, as Todoroki just barely walked in the room and saw everything happen. Momo would give Katsuya the angriest look, as she would then look at the rest of the class and give them angry looks, as she would storm out, and the end of the day would pretty much come to a close. From here, Momo would not text Katsuya, not say a word to him, and during this time, all of them, of course, ended up picking their internships. I forgot to mention that. But what Katsuya ended up picking for his internship was actually All Might. Now, since he ended up picking All Might in this version, he ended up going to All Might's agency, and instead of him going to, actually no, I am going to say that he does go with Gran Torino. but he has to go to Gran Torino on Monday for his 1 week worth of training. So for these next 2 days, what ends up happening is the very next day, Katsuya gets a text from Uraraka. She proceeds to say it was some day yesterday, as Katsuya would text Uraraka saying, yeah, someday it was. He would say, do you want to hang out today? As Uraraka is just like, hang out? Didn't you just break up with, as Katsuya's like, oh, not like that. We can just hang out as friends. Uraraka would be like, oh, yeah, right. As at this point, Katsuya would start chuckling and Uraraka would be like, so what do you want to do? As Katsuya would send her a message saying, why don't you come over? We'll just like watch a movie or play video games or something. As Uraraka would basically end up coming over. From here, Momo would actually have been reading all of Katsuya's messages because she put a little bit of a tracker on his phone, which ended up pretty much hacking it. So Momo has access to all of his pictures and stuff like that. And when Momo sees that another girl's going to Katsuya's house, she would freak out. However, that was not the right answer because she is actually going to be barging in to Katsuki or Mitsuki's home. Not exactly the residence you want to try to start stuff at. And so what would end up happening here is Uraraka and, Katsuya would be hanging out when all of a sudden Katsuya would notice someone at the window. When he would go outside to check, and he would actually see Momo getting out of her car, storming to the door angrily as she begins to pound on the door. From here, Mitsuki would answer the door and freak out on Momo, saying, what are you doing here? Who told you you could bang on my door? And Momo would say, get your son out here. As Mitsuki proceeds to slap Momo and say, get out of here. And Momo gets red in the face and looks at Katsuya as she is angry. From here, Katsuya would hang out with Uraraka and he would end up having a pretty chill day as Mitsuki would barge in the room saying, what was that all about? From here, Katsuya would be like, Mom, would you believe me if I said I don't know? But Mitsuki would say, no, as she would immediately be like, what is going on? You're way too young to be having girl trouble already. As Katsuya would be like, Mom, and from here, Mitsuki would be like, no, Mom. She would say, what's your name, sweetie? As Uraraka would be like, Uraraka. From here, she would say, don't be hanging out with girls like that anymore. Stick to more girls like this. As Uraraka would blush and Katsuya would basically get the door closed on him by Mitsuki. As Katsuya's like, she's never closed the door on me while I've had a girl over before. And from here, Uraraka and Katsuya would have a pretty fun day. Nothing would happen. I can't stress that enough. Nothing would happen. But what would end up happening here is the day that Katsuya actually has to go to Gran Torino's residence for his first day of his internship, he ends up getting a video message from a certain Momo Yaoyorozu. And this video message would be her quite literally getting, you know what I mean? Like she's studying really hard with this one guy with red and white hair. She's pretty much just studying. I can't stress that enough. She's studying, you know what I mean? Like she's studying with Todoroki. And when Katsuya sees that, he is like, okay. From here, Katsuya gets pretty angry, but he's not even with her anymore. So he would say whatever. He deletes it from his message chat, but before he deletes it, he actually ends up downloading it because he has a plan to get her back for what she did. Because Katsuya, in his eyes, he never did anything wrong. And did he do anything wrong, guys? Let me know down below in the comment section. What do you guys think? But he doesn't have time to think about that because he would arrive at Gran Torino's residence when he would see Gran Torino on the ground with literal ketchup or what he thinks blood all over him. Katsuya would rush at him and say, old man, you good? As he would begin to pretty much tap Gran Torino, and he would immediately get up, grab his phone and call 911. As after this, he would grab Gran Torino's body, he would say, gotcha, kid. And Katsuya would be like, gotcha, what? What are you talking about? As Gran Torino would then be like, you gotta learn to take a joke, kid. But from here, Gran Torino would get up and start using his jet quirk to blitz around the room and kick Katsuya right on the jaw. From here, literally 4 days worth of Katsuya just getting beat on would begin, as Gran Torino would use both his experience, his speed, and his combat prowess to pretty much beat on Katsuya, upgrade his durability, and make sure that he has more combat experience for what's to come. And after that, what would end up going down is the Stain incident with killing Ida's brother would still end up occurring. Now, this version of Katsuya is still friends with Ida and was still worried about Ida when he noticed how different Ida was acting. So that's still going to be playing a part. From here, I'm guessing many of you guys probably can guess what's about to happen. Now, the Hosu City incident. With the Hosu City incident, this is what's going to be changing in this version of events. The only real change is going to be the battle with Stain. So I'm going to very quickly gloss over these other minimal details. Obviously, Endeavor's agency is still made aware of the fact that there's a bunch of Nomus trashing the city. Katsuya is still going to be made aware of the fact that there's a gigantic Nomu that crashes into his train. Gran Torino would still jet out of there and pretty much proceed to go over there, and Katsuya would jump out of the train as he would have run after Gran Torino. However, the difference here is he ends up hearing a scream. Now this scream would come from none other than Ida, as Ida quite literally just got stabbed in the leg by the hero killer Stain. And he was actually about to stab Stain in the back, ending him. If it wasn't for Katsuya, who this is where the changes will now begin, would come in and kick Stain off of Ida. He would grab Ida immediately and blast off into the air, as he would then say, "Ida, what are you doing here?" Keep in mind, he also has Native with him, grabbed by the arm, as he would say, "What were you thinking fighting against the hero killer by yourself?" As he would then basically fly into the air and go on top of a building, saying, "Stay here." From here, he would jump down to the building, as he would see Stain literally jumping building to building to go near Katsuya. And from here, Katsuya would think, "Great, now I have to fight the hero killer." As at this point, Katsuya would have a little bit of a slight grin on his face, thinking, "This is gonna be fun." So from here, this is when Katsuya would quite literally proceed to just look at Stain's direction, and Stain would throw a blade at Katsuya, which would end up actually piercing him on the cheek, and a bit of his blood would actually land on another part of a kunai, which is thrown pretty far away. But from here, Katsuya would kick Stain right in the gut, but Stain would literally just throw Katsuya off of himself and say, "You got some kick, kid." As he would then look at Katsuya's direction, and Katsuya would say, "You're not going to touch any of those guys. They are heroes, and you're a villain who's now going to be taken in." As Stain would then say, "How dare you preach to me about heroes, you fake hero." As from here, Katsuya would proceed to simply say, "I don't do this for fun. I do this because it's right." As at this point, Katsuya would say, "Let's go then, hero killer." As from here, Stain would quite literally proceed to be rushing at Katsuya's direction, as at this point, a battle would ensue. Katsuya versus Stain. Now, I'm not even going to overhype this battle. Stain is going to lose pretty badly against Katsuya, simply because of the fact that this is a little bit different than what many of you guys are probably expecting. Katsuya at this point has 55% of full Kali. He has the abilities of, keep in mind, Floats and Black Whip under his arsenal at this point, because 55% is a whole lot of one for all. So what ends up happening here is they would end up pretty much having a semi-aerial battle, to which Stain is not going to be holding a single little bit of a candle to Katsuya. He has explosions the size of literal nuclear blasts if he was to truly want to use the strongest one. And his normal explosions are literally the sizes of houses. So you tell me who you think is going to be winning this battle. Yeah, it's not going to be Stain. I can tell you guys that much at least. So with that being said, what ends up pretty much going down is Katsuya would end up pretty much restraining Stain and using a cloth to bind Stain together so he can't move. He would end up taking Ida to a hospital, and Katsuya would then help with taking out the rest of the Nomus, actually shooting a concentrated blast of an explosion right at the head of one of the Nomus, causing the head to be completely blown off, and that would completely atomize the Nomu's head. From here, what would end up happening is that whole Hosu City incident would go down. The little police chief dog would end up telling Katsuya that Endeavor is going to be getting the credit for all of this, seeing as he doesn't have a provisional hero license, and Katsuya would accept this simply because he doesn't feel like having his mother tell him anything. Not Inko, but Mitsuki. So From here, what would end up going down is that's how pretty much the Stain incident would go down. And now we're going to fast forward to when they all get to class. At this point, Katsuya would look at Momo and say, "So Momo, did you have fun?" As Momo would just smile at him and say that she got her revenge, so she's happy and they can go back to being strangers. But from here, Katsuya would say, "If I really wanted to, I could post that video all over the world." As Momo was like, "You wouldn't." And from here, Katsuya would say, "You're right, I wouldn't, because I'm not some sort of villain or something like that. I don't even know if you truly belong here. What is this about revenge? Why would you feel the need to get revenge on me for something I never even did? You were clearly never right for me." He would walk away from Momo and then walk over to Todoroki as he would say, "And you can keep her, dude. She's garbage anyways." As at this point, he would walk off and they would then have the little hero race in order to see how much progress they made during their training. Katsuya was the one who made leaps and bounds of progress. He has Bakugo's potential. And in case many of you guys don't know, Bakugo has insane potential. And Bakugo's potential has to be one of the greatest potentials in all the series. He has so many qualities of a hero other than the personality. And not only that, but Deku comes in with the personality and the smarts to back up these awesome abilities that Bakugo has. Plus, full cowling, it's not a joke. So from here, what would end up essentially going down is Katsuya would continue training, continue getting more powerful, and the rest is pretty much history. From here, all of the students would then be informed of the final exams and would all be given about 1 week to train for these given final exams. So on the first day after school, Katsuya would decide he wants to go to a little coffee shop and get himself a little bit of a coffee from his favorite shop down the street. However, he would realize it's a little far and would decide to go to another place. And when Katsuya would walk inside, he would immediately see one of the most beautiful girls that Katsuya has ever laid his eyes on. This would be Cammy. And from here, Katsuya would end up walking as he would see Cammy and think, "Whoa." From here, Katsuya would sit down in the seat as Cammy would serve Katsuya, and Katsuya, being the smooth guy he is, would proceed to flirt it up with Cammy, asking her what school she goes to. Cammy would say her shift ends in about 30 minutes, and Katsuya would wait for Cammy in the little coffee, as they would end up both getting drinks, and Katsuya, being the sly dog he is, would end up getting Cammy's number. From here, instead of studying, he would quite literally proceed to spend this entire week hanging out with Cammy back to back to back to back. And that's literally what Katsuya ends up doing for this 1 week off. From here, guys, what would end up pretty much happening is obviously Katsuya would still go back and forth with his mama Inko and Mitsuki, both families pretty much trading back and forth whenever it is that they can. And Katsuya, might I add, does definitely have a pretty decent amount of wealth, seeing as he does have millions of followers. So each post that he does gets him about 100 grand worth of ad revenue and stuff like that. So Katsuya is doing very well for himself. If he wasn't to become a hero, he would still basically have enough money to support himself for the rest of his life. And so the first thing Katsuya does is buys his mom that house she wanted. So she would finally get off of his back for that TV, and then he would buy Inko her dream car, both the actual equivalent value. And from here, what would end up happening is Katsuya would continue just kind of living it up with Cammy as much as he possibly can. Katsuya would also be asked by his dads why he didn't get them anything, as Katsuya would say that their time's going to be coming pretty soon to give him a little bit of time. His dads would both obviously just be like, all right. And from here, Katsuya would just be having a great time. Until eventually, Katsuya would walk into class and everybody would be like, all right, so today's the final exam. Katsuya would be like, we had a final exam? And at this point, he would be like, oh no. As from here, they would take the written portion, which Katsuya barely passes with a C. And and then they would have the physical portion, which I'm going to pretty much spare you guys everything other than Katsuya's battle, because everything else pretty much remains due the same to the canonical story of My Hero Academia. My hero, my hero, gonna miss you. And I wonder if Katsuya is gonna smash Cammy. Yeah, guys, I'm gonna go triple plastic with those bars. So go ahead and subscribe to my Zether singing tutorial channel. It's gonna be first link down below in the description. Trust me. Not satire at all. Trust. Anyways, though, guys, all jokes aside, what would end up happening here is they would all end up pretty much being assigned their own persons, their own people to fight. And luckily for Katsuya, he's actually going to be paired up with the single best person he possibly could have been paired up with. Toru, invisible girl. Yep. All Katsuya has to do is literally tell her to stay out of his way. And that she does very well. So here is when All Might and Katsuya are actually going to be having a battle. Except All Might isn't going to be having no 500-pound weights on each arm and each leg. No, that's not how this happens. Katsuya and All Might are going to be fighting all out. This is a battle which I can finally cover with a little bit of awe and a little bit of tension to go with it. The stakes are going to finally be high for this first battle ever since a long time. Because All Might has fought against Katsuya at about 60% of his effort, but he's never fully shown Katsuya what he can truly do. But Katsuya believes that he's ready. So from here, what would end up going down is Katsuya and All Might's battle would pretty much begin. From here, Katsuya would look at All Might and say, "You ready?" As All Might would say, "I'm a villain. I'm always ready." And from here, what would end up going down is Katsuya would smile as he would say, "Fine, let's go, old man." As from here, Katsuya would look at All Might's direction and he would then proceed to essentially blitz at All Might. Now, All Might and Katsuya would both literally rush at each other as fast as they possibly can, and Katsuya would just completely obliterate All Might with a explosion the size of half of the city. All Might's suits blown away. Literally half of it gets blown away as All Might is sent crashing into a building. All Might would have blood splatter all over him, and he would think that Katsuya's getting stronger by the day as he wipes off the blood from himself and thinks, now I only have about 3 minutes. As everybody watching through like the little camera stuff at the waiting room would just be like, no way. The entire area is literally half of it was blown up and All Might is still standing. But from here, All Might would blitz right at Katsuya's direction as they would end up fighting with hand-to-hand combat. All Might would throw one punch, Deku would throw a kick, All Might would throw another punch, Deku would weave, Deku would throw another punch, All Might would weave, they would both punch each other in the face, they would clash, fists would collide, and they would both be in a battle of who's stronger, 55% Katsuya Midoriya or All Might. From here, Katsuya would begin to push himself as he would scream, "I'm gonna win!" And from here, he would push his body to its upper limits, going to straight up 70%. His bone would start slightly crackling, and he would punch All Might so hard, All Might's body would get blown back. From here, Katsuya would blitz over in front of All Might as All Might would throw a punch that Katsuya would swiftly dodge as another quirk would activate. Danger Sense. He would dodge All Might's punch as immediately he would punch All Might into the air, blitz behind him, and smack him in the back with both hands with a haymaker that would cause All Might's body to bounce onto the ground as Deku would then land in a superhero-like pose, like Iron Man does, as Katsuya would then say, "I finally," breathing heavily would say, "One, looks like the student surpassed the master." As All Might would de-transform into his Small Might form. Katsuya would freak out and everybody would say, "That's not All Might!" From here, Aizawa would immediately turn off the intercom stuff as everybody is basically just like, what? Like, Katsuya really just beat the symbol of peace, All Might? What is going on? You know, everybody's just like, yo, how is this possible? And from here, Aizawa would say, all right. Clearly, we're gonna need to talk about this with everybody. So Katsuya would end up pretty much getting scolded for taking it just a little bit too far, but he would still end up passing, and the forest training stuff would still, of course, be going down. So with that, what ends up happening is Recovery Girl would end up trying to heal All Might, and from here, what would end up going down is all of Class 1A would be told about All Might's situation with his injury and the battle against the one known as All for One. From here, All Might would then tell everybody in the classroom to keep that secret, please, and everybody in the class would do so. Even Momo, because even though she is a little bit of a yandere, she's not exactly a villain, so she's not going to go around telling everybody All Might, the symbol of peace that's keeping them all safe, has grown weaker. Not what she's about to do. So with that said, what ends up pretty much occurring here is Katsuya would end up pretty much getting ready for the day of the forest camp to start. Now, with all of that said, the forest camp does eventually get underway, and everybody does eventually pretty much get on the bus. Now, when they're on the bus, they're all pretty much playing like a game, I guess we could say. They're all pretty much just playing like Truth or Dare and just kind of getting to know each other as a class until they would finally arrive to the top of the mountain, where they could see the point where they're supposed to get to about 3 hours, like a running distance away. As at this point, we would pretty much have it to where what's it called? Everybody would pretty much just be like, but isn't the place that way? Immediately, one of the Wild Wild Pussycats members would throw them all over the edge and say, good luck, as all of them would be thrown off, and Katsuya would go on to catch Uraraka, as Uraraka would use zero gravity on Katsuya, and Katsuya would not only grab Uraraka, he would actually grab the rest of his classmates using Black Whip, Float, and his explosions to keep them all above air, until they all land, and Katsuya would say, is everyone okay? From here, everybody would say, yeah, as Katsuya would smile, and he would say, let's get through this then, as a class, as he would look at Momo and say, it's kind of a class. At this point, Katsuya would then basically begin to rush in, as a bunch of gigantic monsters would come in, but Katsuya would begin shooting explosions, Todoroki would use his ice, Sero would use his tape, Kirishima would use his hardening ability, and the rest is history. They end up pretty much making it to the forest camp, and from here is when Aizawa and all the Wild Wild Pussycats would say, you guys actually did it a lot faster than we even thought. Mandalay would have at this point barely just started cooking them all a meal, and they would all be pretty tired, except for Katsuya. He would say, that was pretty easy. From here, All Might, who's actually here this time, is going to be present, as All Might would say, yeah kid, looks like it. Since All Might does actually, these people know that All Might now has that time limit, All Might pretty much just hangs around in his Small Might form, and All Might is just going to be chilling here at the forest training camp. Now, what this ends up meaning and implying is All Might is actually going to pretty much only really change the story when it comes to the night of the the rendezvous villain attack. If you guys remember, Dobby, Spinner, all them people, that attack, that's what I'm talking about. That attack is the little thing. However, one thing that I have actually failed to mention is Dobby, Toga, and Spinner are not going to be part of the Vanguard Action Squad, because simply put, Stain never got his message out to the people, so the League of Villains never had a bunch of extra members joining them. So instead, it's going to be filled with Muscular and 3 extra villains who have pretty decent quirks, but nothing near the likes of Spinner, or nothing near the likes of Dobby, okay? They're gonna be like Spinner tier villains, which is, decent to deal with, you know what I mean? Like, they're not a pushover, but also not extremely hard to take down. So when it comes to that stuff, that's pretty much how that is going to end up going down. So with that being said, what would end up now happening is I'm going to just gloss over everything, because simply put, nothing changes until the night of the Vanguard Action Squad attack, meaning the Coda stuff, yes, the Coda stuff does still end up happening. And instead of Katsuya being the one who ends up getting the punch to the family jewels, it's actually going to be somebody else. Now, the other person that I think should be the victim is really Todoroki, but it's really up to your guys' choice. Seeing as I doubt Todoroki is the kind of person who would go up to some little kid and be like, yo, what's up? So, yeah. By the way, excuse me, but, yeah, that's pretty much just what I think. From here, what would end up occurring is, let's see, what should happen? I really haven't thought this what if through that much. I've kind of just been rambling, and since it's been like 2 weeks since I've recorded another part of what if Deku and Bakugo fused, I'm kind of a little bit off of my game. But I had to bring this series as a full movie, seeing as the last part got 2,000 views, and I do not want to see this next part get 1,000, the next part get like 500, and the next part get 100 views. It's just not a dream of mine. So I figured I would give it to you guys in movie format. So you're welcome. I promised I was gonna finish this series, and I'm going to keep my word. That being said, what would end up pretty much going down from here, guys, is Deku, or no, not Deku, but Katsuya would end up pretty much just eating a little bit of, what's it called, curry, until eventually he notices young Koda would end up walking off all on his own. From here, Katsuya would follow Koda, and what would ensue is Koda would be crying. When Katsuya sees Koda crying, he would simply wait by the corner and let Koda let those tears out. As Katsuya would simply look down at the ground thinking, must be hard losing your parents at that young of an age. I wouldn't know. I've had 2 sets of parents. He would say that he doesn't know what he could really say, and as he was pretty much getting ready to go over and talk to Koda and help him out, this is when Muscular would appear out of the corner of Koda's eye. From here, Muscular would say, "What's a tiny brat like you doing out here all alone? Huh, looks like I found myself another fun thing to kill, at least for about 5 seconds. Muscular would begin to grow in size as he would say, "That's right. That's the fear I want to see in your eyes as I drain the life out of you with one punch, kid." He would begin to grow as his muscle mass would expand. Muscular would lift his arm as he would say, "Now die!" As he would bring his arm down. From here, Katsuya would rush and grab Koda as he would say, "Run, Koda, now!" Koda would immediately proceed to look at Katsuya as Katsuya would say, "Now!" And Koda would stay back saying, I can't." From here, Katsuya would smile at him saying, "Well then, just watch the show." As Katsuya at this point would look at Muscular and say, "You made a bad choice showing your face here." Katsuya at this point would grab Muscular with Black Whip and throw Muscular into a whole nother mountain as he would speed blitz over there with explosions behind himself, landing on the mountain as Muscular would smile thinking, some fireworks show that is. Let's see if you can really back it up with some power, kid." From here, he would come to throw a punch at Katsuya, but Katsuya would look down at the ground in complete silence in anime fashion as he would say, "The nerve you have to try to kill a kid. He was just a child. Let me show you what it's like to feel utter fear." From here, Katsuya would begin to shoot powerful explosions, and I mean powerful explosions, as Katsuya would cause Muscular's body to get blown into the mountain. Katsuya would begin to say, "Take this. In Dragon Ball like fashion, he would shoot a bunch of explosions that looked like a bunch of little ki blasts at Muscular's body until eventually Muscular would literally be unconscious. Like, he cannot function is how bad Katsuya would have pretty much destroyed Muscular. From here, Katsuya would stand atop of Muscular as he would say, "Maybe that's gonna teach you not to strike fear into others, because now you have an example of what it's like to feel that very fear." As at this point, Katsuya would look down at the body of Muscular. He would then shoot his explosions to go back to where Koda was at and basically tell Koda to hop on his back, that he has him for now. And from here, Koda would say, okay. From here, Koda would literally get on top of Katsuya's back in piggyback ride like fashion, and from here, Katsuya would just blast off as he would then go back to the tower where he would currently at this moment see All Might actually in the middle of fighting some random villains, 3 to be exact. And he would also see Aizawa there, who would have canceled their quirks, so that would have made it that much easier to fight against these individuals, I guess you could say. From here, what would end up essentially going down is Katsuya would pretty much give Koda right over towards Aizawa, as at this point, many of you guys are probably like, what is the Vanguard Action Squad here for if Bakugo isn't in the story? He's not even the main target. Some of you guys might be like, are they there for Tokiyami? No, that's not what the villains are here for. This isn't like the Vanguard Action Squad attack. This time, this was a full-scale attack to take All Might down, with the main threat being a high-end Nomu and All For One. Not to mention, there's not only going to be one high-end Nomu, but 5 high-end Nomus. So from here, how this story would pretty much progress is Katsuya would go into the forest as he would see Dark Shadow or Tokiyami going crazy. Shoji at this point would be trying to hide, but Katsuya would blast in, shooting explosions, causing Tokiyami to be able to let loose for just a little bit. And they would run into the forest until eventually a high-end Nomu would come in out of nowhere and hit Katsuya. As Katsuya would be sent flying into a tree, Katsuya would then look at Tokiyami and say, come on, use that damn thing. From here, Tokiyami would say, I'll lose control. And Katsuya would say, I'll help you gain it back. Use that Dark Shadow thing of yours. Tokiyami would say, right. As he would let Dark Shadow come out, Tokiyami would then pretty much give full control to Dark Shadow, as Dark Shadow would rip the high-end Nomu limb from limb, until eventually Katsuya would come in out of nowhere, aim his hand straight at the sky in like literally Kamehameha like fashion, but just have both hands extended out, and from here he would say, die! As a gigantic nuke-like explosion would blast off into the air, which would pretty much engulf everything in that vicinity with light. As they would think, is the sun out? It would be a bright explosion that even All For One would bear witness to. As from here, that high-end Nomu would be completely obliterated. From here, one more would come at their direction, as Katsuya would say, let's do it again. Dark Shadow would come right back out, and Shoji would then say, there's somebody coming towards us. As from here, All Might would end up arriving at their location, and this is when All For One would arrive, as well as the rest of the high-end Nomus. From here, All Might would say, Katsuya, I need you to help me with this. As Katsuya would say, right, All Might, I'll take out the Nomus, you take out the big bad over there. As All Might would nod at Katsuya's direction, from here Katsuya would say, right then, let's go. From here, we would basically see Katsuya rushing at 4 high-end Nomus, using quite literally 70% of One For All, and using Danger Sense, using Black Whip, using Float, and using the ability that is much like Kaioken. The last quirk that Deku ended up gaining in the series, which was called I'm sorry, but the name actually escapes me at this moment, but I'm pretty sure if you guys keep up with the manga, you should know exactly what I'm talking about. Using the Fajin, yeah, he would use Fajin, an ability much like Kaioken, which allows him to upgrade his stats. And from here, Katsuya would blast around so quickly, as he would obliterate all 4 high-end Nomus, thinking, that's that. And from here, Katsuya would look at the direction of what's it called? Let's see. Katsuya would look at the direction of All For One, as the fight with All For One and All Might has barely started. It's been about 40 seconds since the battle began, and at this point, they pretty much have just been monologuing. Katsuya would stand behind All Might as he would hear all the words, and All For One would then say, so I see you found a worthy successor. Impressive, All Might, but I've found my own. As at this point, Shigaraki would quite literally be shown into the picture, as Shigaraki's hair would be completely white, and Shigaraki lost that restriction of being able to use decay. He hasn't gone through the procedure, which pretty much buffs him to be one of the most broken characters in all of the My Hero series, but he is very, very powerful to say the least. So from here, Katsuya would proceed to essentially look at Shigaraki, as Shigaraki would rush in front of Katsuya and he would stand right in front of him as he would go in to touch Katsuya. But from here, Katsuya would shoot an explosion into the air as he would say, "I'm not gonna fall for that." And from here, Shigaraki would shoot his hands as decay into the ground as everything would start pretty much crumbling underneath their feet. From here, Katsuya would think, "What is this?" And Shigaraki would just basically be rampaging as Katsuya would say, "I need to put an end to this guy once and for all." So from here, Katsuya would think, "All Might, get out of the way!" All Might would look at Katsuya, and All For One would simply have one thing going through his mind. He's gonna do it. From here, All For One would see that Katsuya is getting ready to shoot a full force explosion at them, and what he would do is pretty much shoot at their direction as fast as he possibly can, shoot an explosion at the ground, which would blow literally 20 feet of dirt off of them. As All For One and Shigaraki are pretty much falling into the crater, Katsuya would blast underneath it and then say, "This ends here, All For One," as he would say, "Full power, 1,000,000%, howitzer, explosion!" And from here, a massive nuke-sized explosion like the last one would go off, incinerating All For One and Shigaraki. Or so they think. Portals were opened by All For One at the last second, as All For One would appear behind the symbol of peace, All Might, and All For One would have Shigaraki touch All Might by the throat, as All Might's body would begin to slowly crumble away. All Might would look at Katsuya's direction and say, "Keep them safe," as those were All Might's last words, but his last action was that of a smile. And when Katsuya sees All Might's body hit the ground, it would fully go to dust. From here, Katsuya would look at the ground, eyes widen. Everything that he had pretty much tried to save, broken. He wasn't able to defeat them. Katsuya would think, "No. All Might!" He would scream to the heavens as he would say, "How could you? How could you?" Looking down at the ground as he would say, "You're not gonna get away with this," as he would scream and then proceed to say, "I'll kill you." From here, he would proceed to blitz at All For One's direction, who has a smile on his face. And from here, he would shoot a full power explosion at All For One, incinerating him. However, right as he did that, All For One was able to transfer his consciousness into the body of Shigaraki, Tomura Shigaraki. And from here, Deku would pretty much jump up into the air with explosions as he would say, "You're not gonna get me with that decay quirk." He would shoot Black Whip tendrils at Shigaraki, throwing him into the air, as he would then begin to pummel Shigaraki, ragdolling him in the air as fast as he possibly could, to the point where Shigaraki's body would get blown to bits and pieces. Arms and legs would literally get blown off by punches with the power of 100% full cowling, plus the explosions. Deku would then proceed to say, "I'm tired of this," as he would shoot an explosion at Shigaraki, eradicating him. And from here, Katsuya would land on the ground, look at All Might's ashes, and tears would begin to flood out of his eyes, as at this point, Katsuya would be seen by Aizawa, as Aizawa walks over to him, pretty much sits right down next to Katsuya, and Katsuya would literally just be crying into Aizawa's shoulders, as at this point he would think, "Why?" And at this point, we're going to be having a time skip to where everybody who was pretty much hurt in the incident would be in a hospital. Nobody was really tragically hurt in this version, and nobody really suffered any insane injuries, but a bunch of people definitely were a little shooken up by the fact that these villains ended up attacking and that All Might died. From here, a press conference would be held and everybody would be informed of the tragic passing of the symbol of peace, All Might. From here, everything wouldn't feel like My Hero Academia. Things would go into a dark sort of depression in the world. Crime rate would slowly start to spike up, and this would lead to Katsuya swiftly having to become a symbol of peace, somebody who can pretty much bring hope back into people's lives. And Katsuya would basically stop taking like his school at UA like not so seriously, and from here all of them would now be tasked with the provisional licensing exam. Now usually I never cover this, and I'm gonna keep that trend going because I don't like the provisional hero license. It's so boring. It's so boring. I don't know if it's just me, but I find it so boring. Everything just stays like canon. Katsuya passes it with flying colors because he's not messing around. He does end up having a couple of cool moments with Cammy here and there, and Uraraka gets pretty jealous thinking, I thought it was us. But one more person who also feels really jealous is going to be Momo, as she ends up texting Cammy saying that you better stay away from my man. But what she doesn't know is that's not your man. That's not your man. You know what I mean? Like, that's not you. That's someone else. And so what would end up pretty much going down is what's it called? Katsuya would end up being like, yeah. And from here, what would end up pretty much going down is Katsuya would end up pretty much okay, I need to like get it all together because I just said pretty much what would be going down like 50 times in a row. I'm sorry guys, I'm sorry you guys had to deal with that, but I was looking at my phone and I got a little distracted, I'm not gonna lie. But I lost my train of thought. So the provisional licensing exam ends, and that is that. From here, they all finally end up meeting the big three of UA High School. Mirio Togata, Nejire, whatever, and then Sun Eater or Tamakichi. Tamaki. And with the big three of UA pretty much coming in to meet Class 1A, what would end up essentially happening from here is Mirio would try to explain himself in the best way he can. By a fight, a show of power, as Mirio would like to say it. So from here, the entire class would be taken towards the training facility, and Mirio would proceed to decimate the entire classroom. He would obliterate everybody and pretty much show them that all that they need and what they're lacking is pretty much experience. And after he beats everybody with the exception of Katsuya, Mirio would actually end up being completely shocked when he goes over towards Katsuya's direction and ends up acting as if he was about to poke him in the eye. However, when he does this, Katsuya would close his eyes, and when Mirio goes in for the gut punch that was supposed to finish things off, Katsuya's danger sense would kick in as he's swiftly able to shoot an explosion, changing the trajectory, grab Mirio's arm, and as he was about to slam him onto the ground with an explosion, Mirio phased right through it, hopped back up, and got his distance, thinking, this kid's fast. From here, Katsuya would activate 50% full cowling, blitz before Mirio and say, boom. As from here, Mirio would go intangible, and Katsuya would throw a punch which goes right through Mirio's head. From here, Mirio would appear behind Katsuya, and it would pretty much be a standstill for 10 minutes. This would go on where Katsuya catches Mirio off guard, but right in the nick of time, Mirio is able to pretty much save his behind. Actually, I said 10 minutes, but let's say something more believable or realistic. Let's say this goes on about 7 more times before finally Katsuya is able to shoot an explosion at the ground, causing Mirio to get his balance thrown off, and mid-fall, Katsuya actually slams an explosion into Mirio, sending him flying and burning Mirio's body to a little bit of a crispy, nice tan, you know what I mean? And from here, Mirio would pretty much be like, you got me good, kid. But from here, Katsuya would say, maybe they lack experience, but I sure don't. He would walk over towards Mirio, stick his hand out and say, you did a great job. What's your name? From here, he would say, my name's Mirio. Katsuya Midoriya. Nice to meet you. From here, both of them would smile, as they would both pretty much just get to know each other. And from here, class would end when all of a sudden Katsuya is walking away towards his house when from the wall he sees Muriel's head stick out as he would proceed to give Izuku Midoriya, or Katsuya, sorry, the enticing offer of pretty much going to train with Sir Night-Eye. From here, Katsuya would be like, oh, I'd love that. He was All Might's sidekick back in the day, right? Mirio would say, he was for sure. He's my teacher. I can help you get in with him if you'd like. From here, Katsuya would say, nah, that won't be necessary. Trust me, I think I can handle myself. But from here, Mirio would be like, all right, I understand. Well, I guess I'll let you go off to your own devices. And Katsuya would say, yeah, sure. From here, Mirio would say, well, then I guess I'll be seeing you around, Katsuya. As from here, Katsuya would walk over to his house, have dinner with his family, and this wouldn't be just one of his families, both of them. They would end up going to a pretty decent restaurant, Olive Garden, you know what I mean? They go there, they eat pasta. They have a pretty good night, and from there they end up going out bowling as a family, as they pretty much want to see who's better, Inko and Hisashi, or Mitsuki and her husband, whatever the dad's name is, because we never are really told, but Bakugo's dad. From here, what would end up going down is they're all having a good time, and Katsuya would get a text from Cammy saying, hey, how about we hang out tonight? From here, Katsuya would say, definitely, my place or yours. And she would say, how about you come to mine? From here, Katsuya would go back to his house as, Katsuya's over there getting ready, trying to, get a little ready for his little lady or whatever it is. And Katsuya would be pretty much having a little bit of a devious smile, you know what I mean? Like he's about to go do his thing, if you know what I'm saying. And from here, Katsuya would enter through Cammy's window. Now, they end up hitting the books, you know what I mean? Like they end up hitting the books, they study biology, they study math, they study everything that you guys can really think of. They're doing their thing. And when they basically are finished, Katsuya would be putting his pant leg on as Cammy's father, he just woke up and went to check on her. What's all that noise, he would say groggily as he opens the door and sees a boy putting his pant leg on and then quickly rushing out of the window. Cammy's father would rush at the window and be like, who's that? As he would quickly run away from there using full cowling to get all the way back at his house in about 1 minute. And Cammy would then proceed to never hear the end of it from her father as that happened. And from here, Cammy texts Katsuya saying, yeah, she's probably not going to be talking to him for a while. As Katsuya would says, yeah, kind of figured. From here, she would basically say, well, I'll see you around. As Katsuya would say, definitely. And from here, they would end up having a little bit of an awkward moment together, if you know what I'm saying. But after that, this is when eventually the day of the internship would come around and Katsuya would end up having to go meet the certain somebody by the name of Sir Night-Eye. From here, what would end up going down is Katsuya would enter the building as Night-Eye would say, so you're the successor of All Might. Don't seem too impressive. I still think he should have given the quirk to Mirio. And from here, Katsuya would find out that Mirio was actually one of the candidates for the quirk of One for All. He would think, definitely a good candidate, but I don't know if what you're saying really adds up. As from here, Sir Night-Eye would say, well, regardless of the fact, let's get started. From here, he would sign the paper, and many of you guys might be like, yo, sign it? Isn't he supposed to try to make Katsuya get the stamp from him and become this crazy challenge? No, actually, because keep in mind, Sir Night-Eye has foresight. He can see the future. The future that he foresaw led him to believe that Katsuya gets the stamp. And because Sir Night-Eye doesn't believe in changing your destiny, Sir Night-Eye is basically just like, yep, not gonna do that. Because every single time that Sir Night-Eye would look into the future, Katsuya always wins. Kind of like if you guys have seen not the Doctor Strange movie, but Avengers Endgame, when Doctor Strange is like, just one. And he ends up telling everybody that there's just one chance to beat him. That's pretty much what would kind of end up going down with what Tsunade thinks. Like there's zero chances that he ends up pretty much beating Katsuya and keeping the stamp away from him for about 1 minute. So with that said, he ends up signing the papers, and from here, Katsuya would actually end up essentially being told by Mirio that they should go out on patrol. From here, Mirio would look at Katsuya and say, Tsunade is quite the person, quite the interesting fellow, isn't he? And Mirio and Katsuya would say, yeah, he's quite the character. A little bit obsessive with All Might, huh? As he would look at all the All Might stuff that he has in his room, and Mirio would say, yeah, a little too much. As Katsuya would say, yeah, thinking about his own room that is filled to the brim with All Might action figures. Thinking, yeah, who in their right mind would do that, right? Like, right? Not me, right? Yeah. And that's pretty much what ends up going down in terms of that stuff. But from here, what would end up essentially going down is Katsuya ends up having, you know, his own like little fun with with Mirio. Right, yeah, Mirio. And what ends up happening here is they end up patrolling until eventually Mirio has a small girl with like white grayish hair and a little small horn on her head bump into him. She would look into Mirio's eyes and have nothing but pure fear in them, as she would quickly hold on tight to Mirio's leg, and from here, Katsuya would see as a man would walk out of the shadows. This man would be Overhaul. And from here, what would end up going down is like they would end up pretty much having a standstill, as Overhaul would say, Eri, come back to me. From here, Katsuya would say, why is she all bandaged up? Overhaul would say, oh, you know how kids are, always getting into trouble, getting hurt, if you know what I mean. Being a parent, huh? As, you know, he's trying to play things off while exuding a little bit of bloodlust, which Mirio and Katsuya can both actually feel. But from here, Eri would pretty much be given a signal by Overhaul saying that he will literally overhaul them if Eri does not come back. So from here, feeling the insane bloodlust that Chisaki is pretty much giving off, or Overhaul, she would proceed to run over towards Overhaul's direction slowly in fear, as she's quaking, she's trembling. But from here, Katsuya would say, I don't think so, as he begins to walk towards the direction of Eri, however, going to try to pretty much stop her. At this point, Overhaul would take off his glove and swing at the air at the direction of Katsuya, and he wasn't even able to react. For some reason, his danger sense didn't kick in. It malfunctioned. And from here, Katsuya would quite literally be shot in a blinding light as Overhaul grabs Eri, and using that light would pretty much just like grab Eri as he runs off with her. From here, Mirio would look at Katsuya saying, Katsuya, are you? As at this point, the bright light would stop, and Deku and Bakugo would both literally be laying there on the ground, unconscious, passed out. And from here, Mirio would be like, what? But from here, he would take like both Deku and Bakugo towards like a recovery girl, and she would say, quite the miracle. It appears that they defused. From here, Mitsuki and, Bakugo's father would come in, Hisashi and Inko would come running in, and they would both see their kids, both literally passed out, until eventually they end up waking up. And Bakugo opens his eyes as he would think, what? As before he could say anything, he would look at Deku's direction and say, Deku! What the hell did you do? From here, Deku would open his eyes saying, Kachan! As from here, Bakugo would say, I've been trapped within you for years. You have some explaining to do. And from here, Deku would be like, I don't know, I don't know, Kachan. But from here, Bakugo would begin to freak out on him, and both of the parents would not know how to feel. Because, here are their own sons. But what happens to Katsuya, the boy that each of them has raised for the past 10 years? what happened to that boy? Is he gone forever? From here, Deku would look at their parents as he could see that both sides are sad. They look upset, but with smiles on their faces as well. They look slightly upset, but happy at the same time. Inko would give her young Izuku a big bright hug, saying that she never thought she would see him again, and say that she's gonna miss Katsuya. But from here, they would both look at each other thinking, what happened? As immediately, both would get insane headaches and would remember everything that they lived through as Katsuya. As from here, they would both essentially look at each other and think, what now? I mean, I haven't been myself since it happened. From here, Deku would look at his hand and say, so that's it. I guess I'm back to being quirkless. He would think, well, it was fun while it lasted. Bakugo would yell at Deku saying, that was my quirk, damn it. As at this point, Deku would be like, yeah, Kachan, I know. And from here, Izuku would quite literally proceed to do the motion of shooting an explosion, but suddenly, an explosion would combust from his hand. As Kachan is just like, huh? From here, he would shoot the explosion, and he would then immediately try to activate full cowling as it activates. And Deku would do the same, both of them realizing they both have the explosion and full cowling. But what's strange is each of them only hold 50% of One for All now. It was divided in half, with both of them still having each individual quirk. So now, Deku and Bakugo both have all of the abilities that Katsuya had, but with the power literally divided. And it was actually divided a little bit more because of the fact that it was multiplied by 10, plus the fact that they had Fajin, plus the fact that they were, that they had the ability of One for All, which is already an amplifying type quirk, which pretty much is able to stock quirks and pile them up. You know what I mean? So this is definitely a freaky situation. But what ends up pretty much occurring from here is that they both don't know how to feel, but they remember that girl, and both of them simultaneously would think they need to save her. From here, both would pretty much get into their own individual hero costumes, and they would pretty much end up going back to class, which results in everybody in class 1A being like, so you both were Katsuya? As they're like, yeah, when we were kids, we were fused into one person with this idiot's quirk. As Deku would just think, hey, it's not nice, Kachan, but Bakugo would look at Deku with an angry expression saying, yeah, well, it would have never happened if you never touched me as a kid. From here, Deku would be like, sorry, Kachan. And what would end up pretty much going down here is Deku would be like, I don't know what's next. Like, what do we do? I have so many memories as Katsuya. I don't have any memories of my own. Bakugo, while not wanting to admit it, would also feel the same way. Although he doesn't want to go back to being Katsuya, he really isn't anybody in his normal body now. Because all of his pretty much experiences and achievements were because of the other half that he had with him, Deku. And so both of them are facing this dilemma of what do they do? And so from here, they would end up pretty much getting like ready to face this battle ahead of them. And yeah, I know I said that both of them had the abilities of the quirks back, but I'm actually going to retcon that. And you will see right now why I do that. Instead, let's say that each of them have the ability of full cowling, 30%, and they don't have even Black Whip as a secondary quirk. They just both have explosions and 30% One for All to back them up. So this is when the overhaul stuff would end up going down. Now, I'm going to gloss over everything other than the main important thing, which is going to be taking a while to to explain. So let's get started. From here, what would end up essentially going down is Katsuya would be like, yeah, what do we do now? And Bakugo would say, don't know. But from here, they would each end up pretty much acknowledging that they're gonna have to do something sooner or later. Eventually, they're gonna have to like say something about their whole little Freaky Friday situation. But they're both pretty much on the search for Eri, both using their quirks to pretty much blast their way down over towards Overhaul, as Mirio at this point has had his quirk erased, and they would both arrive in the nick of time to save Eri. From here, they would both press Overhaul, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this battle would be a pretty nice spectacle to see, up until Overhaul gets sick and tired of starting to lose against two brats, as he would then pretty much start fusing with all of the people near him. Kendo Rappa, his minions, he would begin to fuse until he turns into this gigantic monster state that only 100% full Cowling Deku was able to handle. From here, Mirio would pretty much be by the side of Eri protecting her, and Mirio never ended up having to fight against Overhaul without his quirk in this version, because they arrived just before Mirio got his quirk stolen. So this Mirio isn't in that messed up of a state for this version of events. And so the fight between Overhaul and Bakugo and Deku would be an incredible fight to behold. However, it would end up resulting with both of them not quite being enough. And from here, Overhaul would hold Bakugo in one hand, hold Deku in another, as he's pretty much crushing both of them. And both of them are looking at each other with tears coming down their faces. They're crying, they're pretty much screaming in pain and agony as both of their bodies are being crushed by the force of Overhaul's gigantic arms. As at this point he would say, "Get ready to die," and he would be ready to put in the final squeeze. But at this point Bakugo would say, "Deku, do it! We won't be able to do anything by ourselves." And as much as I hate to admit it, I kind of miss it. As Deku would cry and both of them would look at each other in this emotional moment so reminiscent to the moment in the Two Heroes movie, I believe it was, where Bakugo ended up getting one for all for a little bit of time and they ended up touching hands. That is literally what would end up going down. They would touch, their blood would pretty much collide, as from there a giant golden light would engulf the area, as Katsuya would appear and immediately he would say, "I'm back." From here, he would proceed to shoot a gigantic explosion as he shoots Overhaul into the air, using 100% one for all, and all of the quirks that he had before would proceed to pummel Overhaul over and over and over and over until Overhaul was just beaten to a bloody pulp. Overhaul would land on the ground as Katsuya would be victorious. And from here, everybody in the class would rush over to see what Deku and Bakugo did, but they would see Katsuya and they would say, "What happened?" But from here, Katsuya would smile and say, "Nothing. I'm back to feeling like myself." But that, ladies and gentlemen, is where What If Deku and Bakugo Fused, the movie, is going to be ending. If you guys enjoyed today's part and you want to show your support, then go down below and smash that like button, as well as let me know what you guys thought about this series. This has to be probably my favorite series that I have ever recorded. The plot of Katsuya being like a new character fused from the likes of Deku and Bakugo and then splitting up by the means of Overhaul at the end? Who could have seen that coming? Who I tell you? Well, I'll tell you exactly who. My man, That One Weed, the one who actually gave me the inspiration for that idea. Your link will be posted down below. He's another What If creator who posts such amazing content, so it would mean the world to me and him if you guys were to go over and check it out. With that being said, please make sure to go show your support down below, leave a comment letting me know what you guys thought about the video, and turn on those post notifications so you never miss a future upload. With that being said though, guys, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Zether, and I am signing out. Peace.